listening to the sweet sounds of the After Movie Diner. Support us at patreon.com/After Movie Diner. Or I'll punch you in the teats. Rate and review us on iTunes, Earthling. And now, here's your host, Jon Cross.
That's right, I am Jon Cross, and I hope you're sitting comfortably. From his time hunting alligators in the swamps of Pittsburgh with a crude shiv fashioned from an old hardback edition of a self-help guide to better pond maintenance and a shard from a broken bar mirror, to his time as the personal assistant to Ravi Shankar, where he perfected advanced sitar waxing and how to remove broccoli from a 50-yard radius without gloves, my guest this week has had a long and varied existence on the planet. He's built weird art pieces out of dried hobo hair that once sold to legendary jockey Pat Day for a six-figure sum. He's catalogued every single vinyl recording of the song Hornswoggle, a jaunty jazz ditty from the 30s by Herb Shaggs and the Yolanda Pink Orchestra of Belize. And in 2017, he was finally crowned King of the Ring by the Dade County Jewelry Association and given a lifetime supply of rubbery hams. You probably know him as Axel from the wonderful Profondo Cinema podcast and WGON radio, but I will always know him as the gentleman who single-handedly wrestled a circus clown with a Kalashnikov to the ground because he was wildly and aggressively threatening his favorite Burt Reynolds signed Hooper poster. Ladies and gentlemen, and if we're fair, gentlemen, and if we're fairer, men in cut-off sleeveless denim jackets with luxuriously greased perm mullets who are in knife gangs and who occasionally play Whitesnake loudly at confused neighborhood children, my guest, Axel.
Has it really been since 2015 that we've done something like this?
What was it?
I was looking in the like my Skype call history, and that, to the best I can tell, it looks like we haven't connected via Skype since 2015.
What episode was that? What was the last episode you were on? That's the bit I don't know. I'm just looking. We did, I don't know the dates here, but I know that we did an episode 151 on British gangster flicks with Jay Scott.
That's right.
I don't know when that was, though. I don't have a year. I just have a day.
Just the Ben Kingsley film and the...
Yeah, Richard Burton film, Villain.
Richard Burton, that's right, Villain.
Well, that was 151, and I'm now up to almost 300, so that's some time ago now.
Sounds like about possibly 4 years, right?
Yeah, something like that. Seriously, that was the last time we were on each other's show? The Friday the 13th? I haven't done a Profondo since then, and you haven't done a Diner since then?
Well, I mean, Profondo is since... 2015 is right when it slowed down to, just whenever the heck, It's because I'll never stick a fork in Profondo. It still exists, but, might be one episode a year. I don't know. It's whenever I can convince John to do one.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, the Brick Gangster Flick one was 4 years ago. Was the last time you were on a show. The Sorority House Massacre one was 6 years ago, which is weird because I just listened to it the other day, so it's sort of fresh in my mind, and I feel like we just did it. The Jim Wynorski special, where we did Hard to Die in Chopping Mall, the sequel to that one, was 6 years ago. And you were on the Christmas Extravaganza back in 2011.
I wasn't on the Chopping Mall one, was I?
You were, yes, sir.
My God.
We talked Hard to Die, which is the unofficial Slumber Party Massacre.
I think I must have watched that on YouTube. I want to say I watched that on YouTube, or you sent me maybe a 700 megabyte, AVI file or something.
Most likely,
So we did a sorority and Slumber House all in one.
We did. And then
that was one mega-sode.
It was. Well, we did 5 films. We did the first, the 3 Slumber Party Massacre trilogy, the 3 of the Slumber Party Massacre films, and then we did Sorority House Massacre 1 and 2, and then you came back for the Jim Wynorski special. So that was episode 59, was the Sorority Diner Party Massacre Horrortober special. And then about 20 episodes later, you came back when I got the Jim Wynorski interview, and we did Hard to Die, which is the Sorority House Massacre 3, the unofficial one. The unofficial...
Hofstetter is also in it as well.
No, not Hofstetter. Orville Ketchum.
Ketchum, that's right.
Is in it. My friend Peter Spellos, who I'm actually, believe it or not, having a roast dinner with soon.
That's amazing.
Peter lives in the New York area, and some time ago, about 2 years ago, I think, we met for breakfast at a diner, and we talked his career. And we've stayed in touch on Facebook and became great friends. And then me, my wife, and him are all going for a roast dinner because he's been doing improv sessions in London and all around England, in fact, and became a great Anglophile. And so knowing me in the city and knowing that the city has some British restaurants and some pub grub and stuff, he tasked me to find a roast dinner that we could all go and have. And I did, and we're doing that in early November. So the Orville Ketchum, mystique, mystery, and wonder continues to this very day. That is
amazing.
Yeah, it's hard to die, my friend. The
I've forgotten about that episode. I'm going to have to go back and dig that one up, because I did listen to the sorority slumber party, the Slumber House 5-film megasode. I listened to that one within the last year, I want to say, but I'd forgotten about Hard to Die.
So I dug that out and I listened to it, and you pointed out something. In fact, funnily enough, I recently watched Chopping Mall again, sort of my annual viewing. And what made me laugh was in that episode, you pointed out something which I'm not sure. I mean, it must have been pointed out by someone before, but I certainly haven't heard it. And that is that it can tag a lady's behind in the panties and not cause anything more than a slight shock. But when it hits her head blows up. And in fact, throughout the movie, the lasers shot by the killbots have a variety of effects on people. They only one time blow someone's head up.
It's like they're either that or they're just toying with them or something.
Yeah, like they're able to set the killbot laser to tag ass, and they're able to just like almost like whipping a wet towel at someone.
That's exactly what I was thinking when you said tag ass.
Tag ass.
Thinking of rolling up a towel and popping somebody.
Set phasers to tag ass, and then and then they're like, "Oh fuck, enough of this. Let's just blow her head off." But yeah, it's a great movie, and we talked about it, and you came up with some great stuff. I listened to both those episodes recently, but crazy to think, sir, that was 6 years ago. Even crazier to think that you were on the Christmas special, which was 8 years ago, and even crazier to think that it was probably somewhere close to 9 years ago that I was first writing into Profondo and getting to know you guys. Kind of mad, right?
Sounds about right. Yeah, we were about a year into it, or getting close to a year in when I think we first heard from you. So yeah,
and I think my buddy Mark Burns turned me onto it. I think, or I became friends with him through Profondo. I forget what came first.
I don't remember how that happened either. Did you know Mark before the show?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
Okay.
And obviously, John Smallberries and the Grossman out of Pittsburgh.
I mean, it's
met through you guys.
It's amazing all the connections that you make, and I know that you weren't necessarily a fan of the podcast, or I don't think you're terribly familiar with the podcast I'm about to mention, but it's all basically a result of this horror podcast from the mid-2000s called Dead Pit Radio.
Yeah, no, I was aware of the Dead Pit forums. I was on there for a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I was on there for a bit, yeah. That may have even been where I found you guys. Either that, or there was another zombie forums as well where you were talking about Romero a lot. I may have found you guys on there, but it was one of those forums that I found you on.
You're probably talking about Homepage of the Dead.
There was that as well, yeah. But I was on Dead Pit for a bit, or I was aware of Dead Pit for a while, yeah.
And really, they were the first podcast I ever listened to, and it's how I know Tim Gross and Kyle Poling, and there's several other people that I've met through there. But it kind of branched out. We ended up creating our own podcast, and there was some cross traffic there that came along from the Dead Pit boards, but then we met like Schlogs, Matt Reesness, people like that, people like yourself, and it just it's good stuff.
Well, I love it, man. Yeah. I feel like the signal will never die. I feel like as long as us old war dogs are still pumping out our garbage from time to time.
That's right. Well, you're still pretty heavily active. I don't think you're not doing the weekly, or are you still keeping up the weekly pace?
Well, we're not every single week, but yes, the design is to be weekly. I have to say, if it wasn't for my good friend Jim Wallace coming along and agreeing to go to a movie and then plonk down in a diner with me once a week, if I had to wrangle various people to do Skype versions of the show every week, then I probably would have wound down a lot. But the nice thing about the live shows that I do with Jim is we can really just throw my iPhone down on the table, go see a movie, and then just record whatever we talk about over the 45 minutes that we eat a burger or whatever. And then that's the show. And I've wound down the comedy and the music a bit on the shows just because who has the time at this point. I did it for 5 years, so if anyone's hungry for my stupid brand of comedy, they can go back and listen to it. I don't see why I need to continue. I figured out at one point I had written something in the region of about 8 hours worth of continual comedy, if you'd added up an average of about 3 minutes a show or whatever. And then I did the maths against how much comedy people like Python had written, and in terms of sketch comedy, and the fact that there were 6 of them, this was just one of me. So I thought 8 hours, that's probably a good amount of comedy to have written, if anyone's interested.
There's a lot of production value in your early years.
Yeah.
And that's where I was trying to get with Profondo Cinema. I was trying to get to a point where we just recorded live. There was literally no production at all. We just had some pre-recorded music we played at the beginning and the end. We talked live, and basically as soon as the show was over, we let it ride, and it was actually uploaded immediately. And I because I was burnt out on the production. Maybe that happened to you as well. So I was into that, but occasionally you'd get like really poor sound quality, and we were actually getting some complaints and stuff. And we just kind of fell out of doing that and got back into the old way of recording and editing and all that. But
well, I think what I like about the way I've started to do the show, Jim and I have now been doing it this way for about 3 or 4 years. But the way that I do the show now. First of all, I think that the comedy or the vibe of the show or whatever comes from the way Jim and I talk. Jim and I have known each other since we were about 6 years old, so we have that kind of brotherly banter, that kind of old married couple bullshit, which makes people laugh. Which we both love. We both love being able to just sit down in a booth in a diner and just kind of, rag on each other. It's good fun, along with kind of talking about a movie and coming up with a thing. And I think we've got our sort of patter down, which is nice. And then I have, what's nice about it is I have the luxury now that if I want to throw a comedy sketch in or do a song, which I have done in the last year, like I've done the odd bit here and there, I can do it. Or if I want to interrupt the show in the middle and do a silly little bit of something, I can do that. But I don't have to do it week in, week out. I can just, I do listen to it. I do audio equalize the sound to try and reduce the background noise of the diner as much, try and bring our voices up as much. I kind of got the setting down for that now on GarageBand. And then I just, I'm working on an album at the moment, one of my serious albums, and I've been throwing some of those songs or the demos of those songs or whatever up at the end of the show just to give people some music if they want. So yeah, I mean, I'm still doing it. I still have, in terms of production value, I still try and make it sound decent. I just don't go overboard in terms of writing a bunch of stuff or editing a bunch of stuff. I'll take any long gaps out, or if someone slams down a plate or drops some crockery in the background or something, I'll try and edit that out. But outside of that, people know it's a live recorded in a diner show, so they either listen or they don't. They put up with it or they don't. At this point, I'm doing it for me and my friends. I never assumed that this was going to lead to me hosting my own radio show or even TV show or anything. So I'm good with where I'm at and enjoying it. And people have come along. I mean, my downloads haven't dropped so considerably, and because I still maintain the website and throw up some contributor articles and things like that, I still get the odd PR company who says, do you want to interview this director, or occasionally an actor or so on. So I kind of get the best of all worlds without having to break my back doing it, I think.
No, it sounds like it's still fun to you, and it's just not as much work, not taking up as much time. That's perfect, man. I wish I don't know if you know or not, I think you do. I'm doing another podcast, WGON Radio. It's all Romero all the time.
I have heard that, so yes, I have.
But we've honestly been, I think, gosh, I'd have to look at the calendar. We've at least got a couple years in, and I'm editing episode 11 right now. So, I guess it's a one every 2 month pace roughly, but we're trying to get an interview with every show, and so far we have. So we're holding ourselves to that criteria, but we've got all sorts of things going on. Like I'm trying to wrap up school, and my co-host just wrapped up writing a book, and so I'm hoping eventually that'll pick up a little bit, and I wouldn't mind doing some more Profondos. I mean, I can do at least one of these a month,
Yeah.
I got time for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you can wrangle John and make that work. But yeah, it's I haven't gone back to WGON Radio this year by the looks of it. I haven't heard any of the last couple of episodes, but I listened to the first few, or whenever you posted the first 2 or 3. They're good. And obviously Mark Burns over in England is now part of the Weekend of the Dead thing. He's getting all the Romero lot, right? He's like best friends with Savini all of a sudden.
I'd like to go to the UK, just regardless of reason, but it'd be nice to time it up with the Weekend of the Dead. That would be a blast.
Yeah, you're kidding. That'd be great.
So, and just briefly, I don't know if you ever get a chance, but or if it's maybe it's a little bit outside your interest zone, but the Living Dead Weekend, they do 2 events per year in Pittsburgh, and I've been making it out to. I've made it out to the last 4. I mean, I'm gonna I'd like to go to all of them, but things don't always line up. But it'd be awesome if you could get over there one of these years. And have you done all the Romero locations and the mall and all that bit?
Yeah, when I first went out for Horror Realm about 5 years ago, Tim and Carl took me around to the cemetery and the mall and stuff. So I've done like the main ones, the Martin House and something else. But no, I mean, I would love to. My plan is to go to Gross Fest this year, or rather next year. That's my plan.
Yeah, to me, it's just I don't do a whole lot, and it's just become my. You know what? I I can do this a couple times a year, see my buddies a couple times a year, and it's not, not such a bad thing.
Did you see Stavrakis when you were out there?
Christian, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always break off some time for him. I actually picked up my Romero bust, my miniature Romero bust from him this trip.
Oh, nice.
From
Very cool.
From his fundraiser. So, yeah, it was... but, yeah, we definitely spent some... I always break off some time for him, and really awesome guy.
I meant to be in Mortal Remains 2. They have a part for me in Mortal Remains 2, and I filmed a screen test and everything that got positive responses, but I've not heard anything for a while. But I know how indie film goes, so they might still be trying to scrabble around to get funding or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I know they've been shooting some stuff, but I mean, it's piecemeal. I think, they're just picking up a little bit here, a little bit there. So, yeah, I mean, I've been trying to get involved as much as I can as well, but I'm just so damn far away. But no, that's awesome. I hope that happens.
Potentially, yes, potentially that's what I would be doing. So I don't know. We'll wait and see. Who knows? I had this big idea sort of before I met my wife and fell in love and everything. But I had this big idea of if I'm going to be living on my own in the Bronx as I was before I met Kim, and just kicking around, not knowing what I'm doing, then maybe I try and get into as many indie films as possible, just because I knew a bunch of people who were making them. So I try to, if someone brings one up, I try to either say, hey, I'll be in this, or I'll do a cameo, whatever, or I'll go film or figure something out. So I've done a few. I've done some of my friend Matt Farley's stuff up in Massachusetts. I've been in all his stuff since we met, which is a lot of fun. And we'll probably mention him because Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 is one of his favorite films, believe it or not, and was the inspiration for one of his first, not his first movies that he made, but one of the first that kind of got released, which was a movie called Freaky Farley. So that'll come up when we're talking about Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. But yeah, I've tried to do a bit here and there. But shall we crack on in, dude? Any more news on your front? Any more news on your end?
No, I think that's about it. Just doing the WGON radio thing once every couple months. You can find that on iTunes. That's pretty much it.
Nice.
The After Movie Diner with Jon Cross will return right after this.
Yes, well, as Axel was just talking about, why not check out WGON Radio? It is a podcast dedicated to the works of George A. Romero and his associates. It's all Romero all the time. That's WGON Radio. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Player FM, iHeartRadio, and wherever podcasts are found. Google WGON Radio and find it. Take a listen. It is interview-tastic. They've interviewed all sorts of people about George A. Romero, people who have worked with George A. Romero. Lots of good stuff. Well worth it if you are a Pittsburgh head, a Deadhead, a Romero head, whatever you want to call yourselves. Check out WGON Radio. It's well worth your time. Yes, if you want to hear an ad read out in the middle of the After Movie Diner for your project, your website, your podcast, your album, whatever it is that you do, if you want to hear an ad read out in my bad English tones in the middle of this show, then please go over to patreon.com/After Movie Diner, and for the $3 or more per podcast show package, I will read out or play a promo for your site, your store, your podcast, your web series, or anything that you want on the show at least twice a month for 3 whole months. My goodness, what a deal. It's basically free advertising, except that you have to pay me. You also get an After Movie Diner mug worth $17, a thank you and a mention once on the show. So why don't you go ahead and do that? Our announcer, Spike, will tell us how.
You're listening to the sweet sounds of the After Movie Diner. Support us at patreon.com/After Movie Diner. Or I'll punch you in the teats. Rate and review us on iTunes, Earthling.
But let's just jump right on in. Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 2. We're skipping the first one because if people don't know, you can actually find an interview with Linnea Quigley and Jim and I covering Silent Night, Deadly Night, the original from about 4 or 5 years ago now, I think, on the podcast, one of our Christmas specials. So we are completing the entire franchise tonight. We're starting with Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 2, which, as I've said before, is a good friend of the show, filmmaker Matt Farley, one of his favorite films. He based his one of his features, Freaky Farley, a little bit on this movie. And he claims you don't even have to watch the first movie anymore. You should just start with this one. And why is that, Axel? Why can you start with Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 and not really even see the first one?
Well, and I believe I texted this to you. And back in the day, when I say back in the day, I guess I mean the mid-late 1980s. There was no internet or anything like that. So my internet was Fangoria magazine. And occasionally you'd get in the back. I think if you subscribed to Fangoria magazine, you got a free personal ad or two that you were able to place in the back. And most of it was for tape trading and things like that, or for exchanging information so that you could trade dubbed tapes of horror films and such. And you also got written in reviews by readers. And one of the reviews that I remember reading back in the day, and I was able to look it up, it was titled "Rip-Off Alert." I need to warn your readers about an outrage currently making the rounds at theaters. It's called Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 2, and it's only half of a movie. The first 45 minutes, in parentheses, I counted every repetitive, mind-boggling one of them, are a rehash of the first Silent Night, Deadly Night, scene by scene. I've never been so angry at a sequel in my life. I wanted to punish the idiotic filmmakers for thinking their audience was so brain dead we slept through Part 1 and wouldn't notice their appalling redundancy. I mean, a 5-minute run-through would have been acceptable, but 45 minutes? Signed, Jim Edward. I guess was a reader at the time. And I remember catching that, and it really put me off seeing the second film. And I mean, just briefly, just so I can, be at peace and kind of half-ass refer to this episode as kind of a full run of this series. Just briefly, my opinion. I'm a really big fan of the first film. I actually, I've always dug it since back in the day. It's a pretty decent for a slasher film. It's a pretty decent character study. I feel like they make a good run at developing the character. They spend, the first, third of the film on the guy's childhood. So by the time the guy converts to the killer, you actually have somewhat of an understanding. It's not completely ridiculous like most of these films are. So I do enjoy it a great deal. I think it has nice gore effects. Linnea is amazing, memorable, and also all the hoopla that surrounded it. It was kind of a big deal. It's definitely stands out amongst the other slashers of the era.
Well, it's also a weird one because while other slashers might put you in the point of view of the killer, it's one of the few that is almost both a prequel and an original story about a killer. Like the second half of the first movie, you are following the killer and you found out his backstory in the first half of the movie. So the first half of the movie is almost a prequel to the movie, and then you're stuck with like the killer, and it's not like any of the other characters in the film are necessarily people you want to be stuck with either. Not that they're bad, bad people, but they're just they're.
Well, the nun is pretty horrible.
Yes, no, the nun's terrible, but then nuns are terrible. I just mean in general, though, the other people he kills off, the people in the store where he works, or the Linnea and her boyfriend or whatever. They're not bad people. Yes, they're busy having sex or whatever at Christmas, but they're not, they're not bad people. But they're also not people you really know anything about either. The only person you know about it is the killer. So it would almost be like watching Halloween and the first half of it be about Michael in the asylum, and then the second half of the movie being about Michael going killing teenagers, and you don't know Jamie Lee Curtis or Dr. Loomis or the sheriff or anyone. They're just fodder for Michael. You know Michael. That's kind of Silent Night, Deadly Night, which is sort of, it makes it an interesting slasher, and unlike a lot of other slashers, unless it's something like a Night School, for example, where you do know the killer throughout and you know the character throughout, but you don't really know who the killer is or who the character is until the very end. Likewise with Sleepaway Camp or something. But there's very few out there where you... Sorry, dude, carry on.
I'm sorry, I apologize, but I'd never sensed that the filmmakers were necessarily... Or I don't know, I can't speak for the filmmakers, but the production. But yeah, the production seemed more of just an exploitation cash grab, and we ended up with, probably better than it, deserved to be, I guess. And you mentioned the characters, or no real significant characters, but for some reason Ricky is lingering around in part one. They did make a point to have him there. Like, I don't know if they have this sequel in mind or what, but do you kind of know what I'm saying? Like they made the effort to point Ricky out.
Yeah.
In part one.
I mean, I know that there's different producers between part one and part two. But no, the idea that I think Ricky is in the first one a little bit because with both his parents gone, he needs something to reach his humanity. Do you know what I mean? Like the killer is
something to ground him.
Yeah.
That's right, because he was there at the final scene.
Yeah, but it's also the idea that Ricky's gone through the nunnery with him. And so I think, yes, while it's obvious once you've seen part two that Ricky was really the only way to continue the story, unless you just do what the other sequels do and just kind of do your own Christmas-based horror. If you're going to do it and keep the same family alive and keep the same motivation alive, Ricky is really the only way to go. And seeing as he's right there next to Billy during all the hardships and horror of part one, it's not too big a leap that he would become similarly psychotic.
Well, the final shot of part one was him saying naughty, I believe.
Right.
So yeah, I mean there was a thread there, but yeah, just I didn't. But at the same time, I do agree with your colleague when he says you almost don't need to watch part one because it is all there in part two. I mean, it's practically all there except for maybe a boring conversation scene between a sheriff and a nun or something that may have been excised, but
I mean, the way I feel about part two is that I know what he means. You don't have to have watched part one, and no, you don't in terms of any plot points. I think that, and what you certainly don't need to do is watch part 1 and part 2 back to back. I think you need to watch part 1 as a movie unto itself. I think you just watch part 1, sit with it a while, give it 6 months or whatever, and then watch parts 2 onwards. I think if you watch part 1 and part 2 back to back, then yes, you would be so frustrated with the preponderance of flashbacks that take place over the first 45 minutes of part 2 that you would be like, oh, I just watched this movie. However, I think that what I liked about watching part 2 this time round, it's probably been a couple of years since I watched the first one, although I am very, very familiar with it. And the flashbacks in part 2 with the new wraparound device of Ricky being in the mental asylum talking to his doctor brings me up to speed with part 1, gives me the all the kills and all the exploitation from part 1, gives me all the weird sexuality and sexual violence and madness and grandpa and watching your mother get raped by Santa and all that kind of good stuff. It gives you all that, and then you're allowed to kind of see just what that's done to Ricky going forward. So I didn't sit and watch part 2 and go, oh, more of part 1. Come on, get on with part 2. Like, I was sat there and it was almost I'm not going to say that it needed to have 45 minutes, but it was at least a welcome look back at part 1. It reminded me of all the great cheesiness of part 1 and weirdness of part 1 and exploitation elements of part 1. And I found the guy in part 2, I'm going to forget his name for a second. Hang on. The actor.
Freeman.
Sorry?
Freeman.
Yeah, I found Eric Freeman was having such a ball with it and really, just chewing up as much of the scenery as he could that, that I really enjoyed it. And you know me, Axel, I'm not one to watch films ironically. I know that there are people who watch this movie and laugh. I know that there are people who watch this movie and quote garbage day. I know that it's become a meme and so on and so forth. And and it is certainly over the top and ridiculous, from Friedman's performance to some of the, kills. But that only makes me like it more from a fun, ridiculous horror 80s perspective. I don't like it ironically or detached from it or to laugh at it. I almost feel like I don't think you do the umbrella death in part 2 and think you're making, a searing, tense horror. I think they know full well that they're making a mad, goofy, eyebrow-arching, ridiculous psychopath movie. And I think they're having as much fun with it that they think they can get away with, considering, they've got $2 a ham sandwich and half a Twix to rub together, in order to make the movie.
Yeah, I can't remember when I first saw the film, but I do remember not, being wild about it when I finally did, but I don't remember. I'm sure it was in the early 90s, late 80s, but I've since the mid 2000s when once I picked it back up again, I've always been a fan of it. And I kind of know what you're saying. Like you don't watch films just because you can laugh at the ineptitude of its creation. You laugh because a performance was funny, or like something was unintentionally humorous, but it just happened to be caught on camera. Things like that. Not oh God, you see the light or you see the boom in the shot. That's hilarious. Am I kind of on the right track here?
What are you saying that? No, no. I would say more that it's when I watch Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, I think the people who are making it are having fun making it. I don't think they're making it a comedy. I don't think they're making it a horror comedy. But they know full well that they've, like I say, they've got a couple of sticks to rub together, a camera, and this guy, Eric Freeman. They have access to the footage from the first one, and they have some ideas for some pretty ridiculous kills, and they've slammed together what they can in order to put out a sequel, and they've had as much fun doing it, I think, as possible. And therefore, rather than feeling that I'm laughing at the movie, in other words, going, what fucking idiots made this, I feel like I'm more laughing along with the movie. So if a guy...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're laughing. I mean, I think...
And not even laughing, just having fun with the movie. Someone gets stabbed with an umbrella and then opens the umbrella. Like, that's fun. And the filmmakers didn't think that they were making, Psycho 2 or something. They didn't think they were making, like, some deep, tense art horror film. They're making a film where, like, some bozo in an alley gets stabbed with an umbrella and then he opens it. Like, they're making a goofy film. I can laugh along with that and enjoy the film for what it is. What I can't do is sit there and be like, what a bunch of fucking idiots, fucking garbage day, blah. Like, I can't do that. Like, I just, to me...
Right, Garbage Day is funny because it's a funny line.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not funny because it's unintended. I can't imagine, you know what I mean? Somebody
totally.
sitting at an editing, you know what I mean? It's hilarious to think of the person sitting at the editing table and it's like, I don't know. Do I cut out Garbage Day? Will that ruin the tone of this that we're going?
Well, no, because it depends. It depends on your take on ridiculousness. For me, I think when ridiculousness is done really well and is really enjoyable, I think there's something kind of mad genius about it. I think some other people look at ridiculousness and assume the person behind the camera is Steven Spielberg, but having a bad day, when they go see The Room or whatever, your man who made The Room thinks that he made this like high art, and everyone's laughing at it. I don't think anyone making Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 is thinking that they're making anything other than how can we make this sequel, which we really can only afford to shoot half of. How do we make this sequel as fun and mad as possible? And if you have a thing where you're like, well, this guy's going to go crazy and start shooting people in suburbia while they're taking out their garbage, you can see a guy behind the camera go, have him say Garbage Day. You can see that. Mm-hmm. And if you, me, and Tim Gross and Kyle and whatever were making a movie and we had the character, I don't know, doing washing or whatever, we'd have him go like Laundry Day. If this movie didn't exist, I mean, like if we would do that and it would be fun. We wouldn't be doing it to be like, oh, aren't we witty? We would be doing it to have fun. So, but what I won't do is laugh at this movie for being cheap, or laugh at this movie for being crap, or laugh at this movie for because I think that the filmmakers are idiots. I don't know where that mindset. I don't know where the Room kind of mindset comes from. It's just not me. I can't. The guy who made The Room was trying to make a drama. If he failed, I'm really sorry about that. I can't sit there and be like, oh my God, these people are really bad actors, because he put the money in that he had. He tried to make it the best he could. If he failed, he failed. But Zack Snyder has failed and spent millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. So, for someone who spends like 20 grand and fails, like, I'd rather salute them than laugh at them, if that makes any sense. Because, it's not going to be a winner out the gate every time. And not every filmmaker is going to be a genius. There's going to be as many dud filmmakers as there are good ones. If not, in fact, there's going to be more bad filmmakers than there are good ones. So, so that's all I mean in terms of like when I hear people making stuff from me. Yeah, sorry, I've gone on a long time.
Well, I think I had you. You're not there to laugh at the ineptitude. I think I had you.
Yeah.
But as highly as I think of the first film, the second film really cooks, I think, once it takes off on its own, once we go on Ricky's journey.
Oh yeah,
and,
it's great.
And we finally move away from said footage. But I will, before we move beyond the 45 minutes or however long footage from part one was included, I love his narration.
Yeah,
his ham-fisted narration over the first, and even his narration even continues, because part of the backstory is newly filmed footage, such as the girlfriend, and also him, where he randomly drives the Jeep over a guy who was getting too fresh with his girlfriend.
Well, that's the one decision. Like if there's something in this movie that is sort of mind-boggling, and I don't know whether they did it. I don't know whether they did it to reference the fact that. So in the first one, multiple actors play Billy in his growing up, right? I think there's 3 actors play Billy growing up. The very young one when he sees his mom killed, and then the middle one when they're in the orphanage, and then obviously Billy as a grown-up. In Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, they like triple down on that for some reason, and I don't quite understand why. But like you say, there's a flashback to when he kills this guy with his Jeep who's getting fresh with this woman in a meadow there. And they cast a completely different actor who's meant to be, 16? Like 2 years younger than the actor that's currently playing. And I don't know whether that's the only bit where I think, were the filmmakers trying to... are the filmmakers fucking with me at this point, or did they
maybe somebody's kid they needed to get into the picture? Who
Yeah, or did they genuinely look at Eric Freeman and go, you know what? If he's playing him at 18, we can't have him play him at 15. We need to get someone else to play him at 15, even though the guy who plays him at 15 looks 25. That's the only bit where I would kind of say. You've you've made a decision there, and I'm not quite sure why you've made the decision.
That whole bit was neither. It was neither well done nor so inept you could laugh at it. It was neither. It just needs to be gone.
Well, yeah, I
don't know what you mean.
Well, except the fact that he runs over him and backs over him like 4 times. That's kind of amazing. That's kind of amazing that someone went, yeah, just have him keep going. That's kind of incredible.
But the reason I mention that is because he still carries his narration through some of those moments, and like there's one particular moment where he's going through his love interest. And there's the narration is, I can't remember the exact words, but he's like, I couldn't afford to lose her.
Yeah, he's what I don't know about Eric Freeman, and again, I have not heard the commentary on the Scream Factory release from last year, but what I don't know about Eric Freeman was is he having fun with it, or is he trying to be Richard Burton and failing horribly? I can't tell. Like, is he trying to be one of those classic voiceover guys, or is he hamming it up on purpose? I guess that's what I can't figure out. Oh, and just a little bit of trivia. I just brought the trivia up on IMDb while we were talking, and I did not know this when I made my quip about the 15-year-old Ricky looking 25. But Daryl Gilbo, who plays the 15-year-old Ricky in a brief scene, the scene we were just talking about, was actually 24 at the time of filming. So I didn't know that, but it's entirely true. And so, yes, they hire, for a movie made in 10 days, where they had, like I said, half a cheese sandwich and a Twix for the budget. And by the way, they approached everyone from the first film to come back, and everyone refused. To say to yourself, well, and they shot the whole thing in 10 days. The sequel was shot in 10 days. I just think the whole idea of hiring yet another group of people to be in this scene. Like, even if you've got to hire one guy or two guys to be in the...
Oh, it's on location. It's madness. What are they doing?
Yeah. It's just sort of crazy. It's sort of crazy. They've gone, well, let's get Ricky, a whole other actor to play Ricky. That's another actor you've got to feed and pay and everything else. I'm just like, get Daryl Gilbo out of there. What's he doing there? You've got Eric Freeman waiting in the wings. But again, maybe the scene where Daryl Gilbo like runs over the other guy, maybe that was shot for like a different film and they just put it in here or something.
You never know. You never know. That's a good boss. I did listen to the commentary and they didn't say anything about that, but a brief snippet from the commentary, I did write down that Freeman had originally auditioned to play a cop in the film, so Freeman almost didn't happen. And then also, the film was born out of necessity because the first film had been yanked from the theater prematurely and didn't really have the return they were expecting, so they were really just trying to remix it into something else that could hopefully pull in some more money. And I think, all things considered, it couldn't have turned out any better. I mean, what I just said sounds extremely ridiculous, but they managed to do it. Hats off.
They did. I mean, if you've got to kind of say to yourself, well, hang on a second, we have all this controversy around the first one, but no one's able to go see it. How do we get a sequel out where they'll get to see a bunch of the first one, but also, like, we'll continue the story? This does that pretty well. One of the nice bits of trivia that I like about the movie is that apparently Eric Freeman received conflicting direction from the writer and the director. Apparently the director wanted it to be kind of a cold and... Oh, no, sorry. The director wanted Freeman to be like a wisecracking Freddy Krueger type killer. And Joseph Early, who wrote it, wanted him to be as over the top as possible in his acting. And Freeman wanted to play him more as cold and malevolent. So Freeman's performance is based on three completely wildly different ideas. On one hand, you've got a guy being like, yeah, be like Freddy Krueger. You've got another guy being like, no, just be over the top and weird. And then you've got your own voice internally saying, I'm gonna play this more cold and brooding. Throw that together, and that's exactly what Freeman does in this movie. He does all three things at once.
Well, that explains his performance a little bit. I mean, everything that I could gather from the commentary is, I mean, everybody was at their utmost serious, in regards to performance. They were, you know what I mean? I don't think anybody was trying to be over the top. I just think it was, inexperience on Freeman's part. You know what I mean? He just, they didn't have time, and you know what I mean?
No,
but
I do. Yeah,
it's crazy how it's crazy how it worked out. That just this is a far-reaching film. Like, I mean, my co-host of Profondo Cinema, Jon Scott, Jay Scott. He's notorious for being difficult to please with these kind of movies. He hates 95% of them, but this one, I mean, he was just immediately on board with it. He completely got it.
Yeah.
It's and like you said, it's. I mean, let's not. I don't mean to. I mean, there is some ineptitude. There's some accidental madness. I think you spoke of earlier. There's some madness at play. Just ultimately, regardless of the intent of the filmmakers, the talent involved or lack thereof, we still got what we got, which is, it's a far-reaching film that people from all walks of life have, adopted as their own.
Yeah, it's enjoyable. Of all the sequels, it's the best sequel of all the sequels.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question about that, and somehow manages to. I mean, even the first film, like I said, it was. I respected. I mean, it's definitely in my top 20 slashers. That's the first film, no question.
Yeah.
But it's also the first film has also kind of been caught up in that hoopla where it's almost like an afterthought, where it's almost thought of less than the sequel. The sequel's celebrated more, and I think watched more.
The first one has a very kind of dark and twisted sensibility. Like, even if they are playing some of the first one for kind of tasteless laughs or at least tasteless exploitation, it's still, and you could spend hours just dissecting that first movie. It's still sort of very problematic and complicated in terms of its sort of sexual politics and its violence and so on. And that's one of the reasons I love it. That's not like me being PC in the future saying you can't enjoy it. Like, that's one of the reasons
it makes no apologies.
Right. That's one of the
reasons in its content.
Yeah, completely. That's one of the reasons I like it. Like, it's an authentic film. It feels like it's a lot of id. It doesn't feel like the writer or the director is saying, "Well, I should hide some of these dark thoughts I have about, killing topless women all over the place." They just go ahead and do it. And what I like about the sequel is that, while it does attempt to lighten up that subject matter a little bit with its goofiness, it also, lies quite happily in the same bed with the, well, if I'm going to kill a woman, she better be topless, or, or having been molested or something. Like, it does have its own weird, like, dark undercurrent, which sort of, I was happy to see that kind of continue in a weird way. And if that makes me sound like a sick fuck, then fine, I'm a sick fuck. I'd rather watch it than do it. That's always my feeling. Much like violence, I'm a pacifist, but I love a good action movie, and the more heads that get chopped off in a film, the better. But I'm not going to go out in the world and do it. So, but so that's, I like that about the second one, that the second one is kind of like, well, what were the elements of the first one? Okay, well, this scene where he runs over the guy in the tractor or whatever, or in the Jeep rather. That guy better tear the woman's top off before that happens, because, that's what's going to set him off. I love that whole idea where it's like, well, how many times can we use, like, I actually started by about the third time they've shown it, and it's shown about 3 times in the first movie as well. I actually felt really sorry for the actress from the first one who plays the mother, the blonde actress, because she did that one scene, and I'm sure, look, I don't know the history of that actress, and I'm not going to look it up, but she does that one scene where Santa obviously tears her top off and so on, and Ricky's meant to observe it, and then they use that sequence about 15 times throughout the first 2 movies. And I get why, it's to justify the character's behavior, but at the same time I feel bad for the actress, because I bet that actress only got paid once. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, definitely, but for some reason you don't feel sorry for Linnea at all.
Well, because,
I get it, but I get it. Don't get me wrong. We're not worried about her paycheck, though.
No, well, it's, first of all, they don't use Linnea's sequence as often as they use the mother's sequence. Secondly, I
think it made an appearance in
no, it does. It makes
in 3 as well, doesn't it?
Does it make an appearance in 3?
Yeah, I thought it did. The horn,
possibly.
Whole,
when we get there, I'll have to look at my notes. But no, the thing in part 2, the reason why it's the mother thing, is that in the Linnea sequence, she's having consensual fun with her guy, and she knows she needs to be topless, and that's a whole sequence, right? It's like it's consensual, and then the killer bursts in and kills them. The mother sequence is, non-consensual and gratuitous and exploitative, and they use it like 15 times, and she only got paid once. That's the difference. Do you know what I mean? Like, within context.
Oh, I'm with you.
Let's wrap up part 2. What are your other thoughts on part 2? What were your other notes on part 2?
I just, I wanted to commend Eric Freeman once again. A tour de force performance.
Solid performance.
Yeah, it's just out of left field, but it's just infinitely watchable. Your eyes are drawn to him. I like Elizabeth Caton. She plays his girlfriend in the film. She was also in Friday the 13th, Part 7.
Oh, yeah, I love the whole moment in the middle where they become Danny Zuko and Sandy. That's my favorite bit in the film.
He couldn't afford to lose her.
It's so funny that you've got the obviously they're riding around on the bike like it's something out of Grease 2, and then you've got the sex scene, which is similar to that. You remember? Is it Double Impact, where one Jean-Claude Van Damme is having a dream about the other Jean-Claude Van Damme having sex with his wife, and it's like the most ridiculous, soft focus, slow motion, big fake boobed, like love scene with Van Damme and this actress, and you just think to yourself, my goodness. And then there's kind of that scene in this movie in its own way. And what's hilarious is that according to the trivia, that it was significantly cut. There was going to be a lot more of it.
No kid. Wow. Well, I wouldn't have minded a little more.
Well,
to be honest with you.
But you have to think. You have to think for the economy of filming, right? So they go, well, we have about 40 minutes of footage from the first movie. We're going to shoot all the wraparound talking to the doctor device in 2 days. They shoot that in 2 days, right? So there's 2/3 of your movie right there. Then we'll have an uber long sex scene. So that's another 10 minutes. You know, the way they mapped this film out, it was really
you got to check every box.
Really economical. I like it.
I can't find the actor's name, but the character Chip, I really enjoyed him. Bleach blonde, kind of Ivy League sweater vest.
That is Ken
ex-boyfriend.
Ken Welchett.
Okay. He was brilliant, though. I mean, I just loved his... I don't know, it was strange. The best part about his performance is he seemed oddly fearless of Freeman, who is a hulking presence, to say the least.
Yeah.
But just the way he plays it, it's amazing, where he's, you know, they're standing next to the car right before his demise, and he says something along the lines of, yeah, that's when I finger fucked her in the back of the car. It's like, Jesus, dude, simmer down.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Let's a quick shout out to the resume of Elizabeth K. Tan. Of course, you and I have spoken of her before because she's in Friday the 13th, Part 7, the New Blood.
It's weird. As fate would have it, earlier today I was listening to a commentary of Friday 7.
Yeah.
With John Carl Buechler and Kane Hodder.
Black Toe.
And the movie Crypt guys.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever... And Joe Lynch, I think, is... Anywho. And the scene where she gets killed, her character gets killed in Part 7, was actually filmed in the Jarvis house from Part 4.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Isn't that
That's
weird?
A nice little bit of trivia. Well, what I like is that when you're going through the scream queens or exploitation queens of the 80s, you might not mention Elizabeth K. Tan, but you probably should, because she has not only been in, obviously, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 and Friday the 13th Part 7, but some also great movies such as Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity, which Michael Campuchiaro just recently reviewed for Cult Classics on the After Movie Diner website. She's in Savage Dawn. She's in Violated. She's in Silent Madness. She's in Thunder Run and Assault of the Killer Bimbos, one of my favorites. Necromancer. She's in a ton of great films. She then
What the hell is Savage Dawn?
Savage Dawn?
Yeah.
Savage
Sounds
Dawn
familiar.
is the George Kennedy, Richard Link, Karen Black movie with Lance Henriksen in it from 1985 about a vicious biker gang.
Fucking A, dude. That cast is loaded, and I love biker flicks.
Yeah, right? You should definitely check that out. Savage Dawn.
I am there.
She plays Becky Sue, clearly a pivotal character in the film. She's also in another, like, if you like kind of either biker gang movies or roller skating movies or anything like that, like what's the well, there's Prayer of the Roller Boys, but then there's gilding the Gleaming the Cube or whatever it's called. She was also in Rollerblade Warriors: Taken by Force, which was a movie from 1989. Made by Donald G. Jackson, written by Randall Frakes. And so, yeah.
Donald G. Jackson, Donnie, if you're nasty.
She's in Vice Academy 3 and 4. She's had quite.
I'm smelling a retrospective coming up.
She's in Vice Academy 3, 4, 5, and 6. Did you know that Vice Academy went to a part 6? Like, who knew? And isn't Linnea in some of those, like the early Vice Academies, or am I getting them mixed up?
I'm not sure. She might be, but it sounds like she's been working pretty steadily.
Yeah, so I feel like I need to see more of Elizabeth Catan's film work, because who doesn't want to see Savage Dawn and Rollerblade the Bimbos or whatever it was? Sounds good to me. What do you say, Axel?
And who doesn't want to see more of Catan in general?
In general, yeah. So I just wanted to give a bit of a shout out, because I feel like
that's great.
People obviously give Linnea her right due, Kelly Maroney, Barbara Crampton, and all, but rarely a salute for Elizabeth Catan. So I felt like if any podcast is going to do it, we should.
Hey, real quick, too, and I just wanted to put this out there just in case we got too far and I forgot to mention it, but I am down for a number of franchises if you are so inclined in the future. I mean, I'm talking Howling, House, any of these series. Like, if you haven't tackled them already, hit me up next October or whenever you're feeling it, because
you could be my franchise go-to guy.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've done Howling or House, but also Prom Night, that series. There's a number of series I've been kind of wanting to tackle. So
we've done a few. We've done Prom Night 2, and we've done. We may have done one of the Howlings. I'll have to go through and have a look, but it doesn't matter. People don't care anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we can always, if you've already covered one, we can always do the 2-minute,
recap.
I like this. Yeah, exactly. Just move on. So, anywho, but yeah, no, Kate, I mentioned Chip, who was amazing.
That is Ken Weichert or Weichert, depending on how you pronounce it.
I like the whole theater scene. I like the guy heckling in the back row. It's great. I mean, it's. They really put a lot together with, like you said, a ham sandwich and.
Yeah, and I hate to break it to you, but Ken Weichert, who was credited as Kenneth Brian James in Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, he's not done very much else. He was 1987. He does Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. He does nothing else worthy of IMDb until 2009. Where he is the host of a TV series called Fit for Duty.
They talked about him in the commentary. I think he's some kind of fitness dude now or something.
Yeah, bald. He's lost his you're
kidding.
Renowned blonde locks.
His peroxide locks.
He was clearly in the army. I think he left the movie business and joined the army. He's done a lot of army stuff. He's known as Sergeant Ken. He's been on a TV series called Tabitha Takes Over, and a movie called Smothered by Mothers, in which he played a character. I'm trying to find him now. Sean O'Grady. Don't know much about that, but it's Bobby Davis, a wealthy football star, goes to bed one night securing his wealth of almost $100 million and awakes the next morning almost broke. It appears that his business manager lost almost all of Bobby's money. The business manager also lost every dollar invested by Bobby's. I'm so bored by this summary, I'm not even going to continue. But if you want to see Ken Weichert's work, Smothered
Yeah,
by
I was going to
mums.
say, it's nice to hear that he's putting in some work again, getting interested in acting, but once you read that synopsis, no.
No, not
Just
interested. No, get
retire.
get K-Town back on the phone. Maybe a reunion is needed in Vice Academy 7, Sergeant Ken Goes Hawaiian or something.
But if for some reason you haven't, I don't know. I can't recommend the movie enough. It's regardless of what kind of genre you're into. If you're listening to the sounds of our voices, then
you should enjoy
absolutely.
it. Yeah. And I get people being pissed about the recap, I guess. And it's the same argument that's always thrown at Evil Dead 2, like, is it a remake? Is it a sequel? Blah, 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 and you have to kind of go, well, it's both. Like, the first 20 minutes remake the first movie, and then after he gets spun through the woods, then it's a sequel, but it's all set in the same place, and it's all set with the same kind of vibe, and so on and so forth, and they redo a lot of, so I don't know, when you kind of start nitpicking it and whatever, is this really a sequel if they use so much of the first one? And if people have problems with that, but then, people had problems at the time with Halloween 3 because Michael Myers wasn't in it. So I've come to the conclusion that people don't know anything whatsoever about anything. Fuck them all. And Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 is well worth a watch. Especially if you haven't seen the first one in a year. Don't bother revisiting the first one. Just go straight on to Part 2. Enjoy it for what it is. Enjoy all the added Freeman brilliance, and then jump straight through to Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 5, because the next two we've got to talk about.
Oh boy!
Oh boy! I mean, yes.
As you were saying that, though, I did kind of realize that had there not been the outrage at Part 1, Part 2 would have certainly never existed in any form, or not in the form that we now know it.
No, it would have either been a straight continuation with a full Ricky story, or
right,
or it would have been like had the first one, right, or had the first one
maybe just never happened,
been a Halloween style success, then yeah, maybe it would have been glossier and more expensive and less interesting, invariably less interesting.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm not sure. It's kind of, it's strange. I don't know if we should be glad that it got that initial negative attention. I guess I am glad because we got Part 2 as a result.
Yeah, and I've got no bad will. I mean, anyone who has ill will towards Part 2 needs to fully re-examine their life. Just ignore it if you don't like it.
Yeah, I haven't really... I'm sure it's out there, but I haven't really heard the negative. It's been kind of a nice positive run for the last 10, 15 years for Part 2. People are into it. They get it. So moving on to Part 3. The Silent Night, Deadly Night. Is the subtitle Better Watch Out! Exclamation point.
That is correct. Yes, Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 3, Better Watch Out, made by the producer of Reservoir Dogs and the director of that fantastic movie, Two-Lane Blacktop, starring James Taylor and Warren Oates. We have Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 3.
Dennis Wilson as well.
Dennis Wilson, yes.
Manson family alum.
Yeah, from the from the Beach Boys. And as everyone points out, what's fascinating is that the first two movies outside of Linnea Quigley, and of course Elizabeth K-Town, but outside of Linnea Quigley, the first two movies do not really star anyone of any sort of worth or note in terms of fame. However, as we get into the third one, it is a veritable Twin Peaks reunion. And Ricky is this time played by the horror man, Bill Moseley, who is in every single horror movie made from 1986 onwards, I think. Isn't that right?
Actually, I was kind of surprised to see him. I remember, I think he had a little bit of trouble finding work for a minute there. maybe it was right after this period, but I think up until, Rob Zombie rediscovered him, I don't think he was getting a lot of work.
Well, no, what's interesting is that he sort of has his three big ones in the first 10 years of his career, in terms of actual things you'd recognize him from, I guess. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, where he obviously famously plays Chop Top.
Right.
He is in Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3 as Ricky. He plays Johnny in the Night of the Living Dead remake in 1990. And he plays several parts, but most famously the Deadite Captain in Army of Darkness. But you're right. The rest of the other movies that he's in, he's sort of very small bit parts, but he's in a bunch of stuff. He's in weird stuff like Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. And he's does a voiceover in Evil Ed, which is obviously a foreign movie that is re-edited. But you're right, it's not probably until 2003 in House of a Thousand Corpses where if the horror fandom had not been aware of him prior to that, they are certainly aware of him after that, and probably go back to find out that he's in Army of Darkness and Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3. And I've got to imagine, obviously people remember Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, but whether they're putting Chop Top and Otis in the same mindset when they first see House of a Thousand Corpses, I don't know.
I had never seen this one before. And you mentioned already that he plays Ricky. Somehow he survived the shootout at the end of Part 2 and is now captive in some white-walled 2001 Kubrick-looking hospital, and his entire brain cavity is viewable through a glass dome that he wears the top of his head.
Well, this is the crazy thing, is I don't know that Ricky is ever shot in the head in the second one. But in the third one, they make the decision that, as you say, the entire top of his skull is removed, and he is wearing this cumbersome metal fishbowl thing on his head to cover up his brain, which is perpetually exposed in jelly. None of which is possible, plausible, or even scientifically probable.
Nah. I mean, why would you? Why would you bother?
Right. Well,
it's crazy.
the doctor, who is of course played by Richard Beymer from Twin Peaks, of course, famously in West Side Story, and then plays Benjamin Horne in Twin Peaks, the original series. The doctor in this, he has brought Ricky back because why? Because of reasons. Because he thinks he can control him or something, right?
Well, isn't he trying to... is there some kind of psychic connection between him and that girl that's going on? And don't ask me why there's a psychic connection, but... And it seems like for a minute they're trying to go for some Kubrickian art house, Argento kind of, psych ward thing. And I was kind of worried the film was going to get bogged down in that, because this is it's pretty evident right off the jump that this is a very low budget production.
Right.
So I was worried we were going to get bogged down in that world, but they break out of it after about 10 minutes or so, and I was somewhat I was actually delighted that it actually turned into a mindless, idiotic slasher with, basically Mosley wandering around with that brain pan apparatus and hacking away at people. I think he was mostly using like a scalpel, I want to say, in this.
Having played Chop Top when Mosley got the script to this, or when the script was circling for this, someone must have gone, actor required to have something grotesque done to his head for the entirety of a movie. Get Mosley on the phone.
There you go. He was on that short list. You're right.
He was on the short list for people who don't mind having ludicrous prosthetics about their head.
Yeah, I wonder if that possibly could have played into the decision, because otherwise you didn't need a name in this role.
No.
You or I could have played this, but I did enjoy the way he's basically just a drooling, kind of a nutcase. He doesn't speak much. He's got that same look on his face the entire time, and
Well, the other thing is that he doesn't need to be Ricky. I mean, I know that they're tying it into Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, but beyond that, there's no other. There's no other reference.
Like you say, they're trying to continue off Part 2, but all the flashbacks were from Part 1. They never actually flash back to anything that happened in Part 2, and I was begging for that. I was like, come on, flashback to some of the Freeman stuff.
Flashback to the 7 different Rickies we've had so far in this franchise.
I tell you what, flashback to some of the Freeman stuff would have really elevated Part 3.
Yeah, I mean,
we never got there.
The biggest problem with Part 3 is that of all of them, I feel like it's probably the biggest missed opportunity, in the sense that you've got a pretty weird and wonderful cast. You've got a bunch of elements, whether it's the Doctor evading the police in order to maintain this ridiculous experiment he's got, even though the experiment has run wild and killed people. You've got the wonderful guy playing the detective, Robert Culp, who's amazing, and there should have been 100 more scenes with him. You've got Mosley, who we know from Chop Top can do more than just stagger around and drool, and you've got this idea of a bunch of mad things that have put Ricky back in motion. So in concept, you've got 3 people from Twin Peaks that are kind of fun to go back and see, that the fact that they were all in this weird little movie together. And you think to yourself, all right, I'm up for this. You've got weird blind psychic chick. You've got Mosley, you've got the Benjamin Horn from Twin Peaks, you've got the mad contraption on his head, you've got Robert Culp, you've got some Christmas stuff going on so that Ricky can be triggered into killing, and you just think, great. And then for some reason, it just grinds to a halt, and the whole movie moves at the pace of Mosley. And that is its biggest mistake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking through my notes because it has been maybe about 6 weeks or so since I've taken these in, but I don't recall any significant gore moments. Nothing that I can refer back to, oh, you remember when that head came off, or something happened that was memorable. One of the notes I have is Bon Jovi keyboardist, poodle cut.
Okay, so but we should talk about this. At the very beginning, there's some real treats in this film outside of the pace. We're going to end up making this film sound a lot more appealing than it actually is. It's slow and awful and badly acted and horribly directed. But at the beginning, where she comes out of her trance, she says, "I really don't want to do this anymore," to the doctor. The moment she leaves, the doctor immediately tells his assistant she loves it and will let me probe her as deep as he wants. She's literally just told him, I don't want to do this anymore, and walked out of his office. And he's like, I've got her. She'll let me do whatever I want to her. And I'm like, no, that's not the case. The receptionist in the hospital, and this was another treat to me. In Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 1, one of the other things that is sort of throughout that first film is just people being unnecessarily shitty to one another. Like, people are just real assholes. And in this movie, the receptionist, it's almost like they went, so what can we carry on from the previous films? Ricky and being shitty to one another as a reason to kill people. The receptionist is super shitty to a blind woman. She's like, what do you want? I'm busy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I totally remember that. What the hell?
What the hell? But that's when she sits down in the reception next to the dad with the rock star mullet and the dark glasses making faces at the baby. Do you remember that scene?
Okay, so is that the Bon Jovi poodle cut?
That's the poodle cut.
Maybe the note?
That's yeah.
And then Mosley shows up before too long, right?
He does. He kills the receptionist because the receptionist was really shitty to a blind woman. But yeah, there's this totally random scene. So the scene is blind woman gets told to fuck off by the receptionist and has to sit and wait for her brother, who also, by the way, has a mad poodle mullet as well, and a Canadian tuxedo. He's at one point they change out of denim to put on more denim. It's a real, it's a whole denim scene later on in the movie, but. The woman, the blind woman, sits down in the reception area, and instead of just, I don't know, some dude sat next to her who halfway through the sequence gets up and leaves, it's a woman holding a baby who is being made faces at by this Bon Jovi keyboard player in dark glasses and like an 80s suit and stuff, and you're just like, I don't like why is my viewpoint being distracted by this scene of this guy making goofy faces at a baby? Like, am I meant to look at that and laugh? Am I meant to look at that and be like, why is that in the movie? Was he just sitting there in the real hospital and they just filmed him? Like, I don't know what any of that's about.
Put another reel of film in.
Yeah.
Keep going. Just see what happens with this guy.
Yeah, see what happens. So the brother has crazy long curled metal hair, and is dating a woman who is identical to his sister, and earlier in the movie touches his sister's hair erotically. So there's some weird brother sisterly thing going on here, and let's not forget the dream sequence in which the Santa. That is plaguing her in her dream sequence gets to say the great one-liners of "You can lick my candy cane, little girl." Vegetables don't drink. I don't know where that comes from. And who's your favorite singer? Perry Como? Because Monty Hellman obviously wanted to keep the references relevant in 1986 or whatever.
I've also got this written down, but I don't remember why. It's no one is ... normal.
Yes.
What was that spoken in the film or something?
I think that's the doctor at the beginning.
Okay.
Or the doctor.
Another thing I had written down, there was almost a complete lack of score throughout.
Yes.
Like there was no accents or sting music or incidentals or anything. It was just silently wandering around and stabbing people.
Well, it's another thing that grinds any movie to a halt. Like if you haven't got like a dum 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 like driving the action, it's you're just watching a zombie, slightly comatose guy with a jello mold on his head running around, and it's sort of not even running around, just stumbling about. And like you say, because the kills are fairly bloodless and fairly uneventful, and not very inventive, it sort of sadly renders the movie. It sadly renders the movie a bit boring to walk through. A bit boring to watch because you feel like you're just going through it at a kind of walking pace. And, an 80-minute horror movie with all these people being bananas in it should not feel like a 2-hour slog. And yet it does.
And the Bill Moseley being happy that Bill Moseley is employed in 1991 or whenever this is.
89.
That can only '89. That can only carry you so far.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. There's a couple of other mad bits that feel to me like it's out of Airplane or out of Kentucky Fried Movie or something. When the news guy is standing in the doorway of the hospital, like the scene starts and you've got your typical news guy. Not only is the news guy reading badly from a piece of paper, but then two guys with a gurney immediately come and like shove him out the way while he's filming. And again, it's another sequence where I'm watching this movie and being like, no, but why is that in the film? Like, what has that got to do with anything? I mean, apart from it being this random sight gag, it adds literally nothing to the rest of the film. It's just totally bizarre that Hellman would put it in there.
And someone had to coordinate it. It was
they had to have a
not
gurney
done on
and
accident.
A guy with a movie camera and a film camera rather, and a guy in a suit. They had to hire an actor. Like, the whole thing is mad. Nobody at any point in the film is horrified at all by the killing spree that's going on around them. Like, like everyone is sort of fine with it. And no one expresses like fear, disgust, anger, upset, nothing. Like, no emotions are shown about that at any point at all. I mean, the blind girl gets a bit terrified, but that's about it in general. I have my sequence here. As if Chris, when they get home to the house, when they're at the grandma's house, which is just an interminable sequence, as if Chris wasn't wearing enough denim for the whole film, Laura puts on more denim.
Reinvigorates the denim.
The denim level. Almost as Hellman looked through the camera, was like, you know what this sequence needs? This sequence that's boring everyone to tears. More denim.
A fine denim blend.
Although Robert Culp does come in towards the last third of the movie and save the day with lines like studying.
What do I know him from?
You know Robert Culp from he was in The Greatest American Hero, the TV show.
Yeah.
He was in I Spy, the TV show. He's in Hickey and Boggs, the Bill Cosby movie from the 70s.
Well, does he have like a big role though? Was he in like?
In what? I mean? Hickey and Boggs?
No, I mean Culp. Does he have like a, like a key role that everyone would know him from?
Not really. I mean, he was on a bunch of Columbos. He was.
I mean, I know his face.
He's in Big Bad Mama 2, the Roger Corman produced
definitely
movie.
Seen those.
He's in Combat High, which was a TV movie, which was also known as Combat Academy, which was an early George Clooney movie with Keith Gordon from Christine. He's in Combat Academy, which we covered on our George Clooney before he was famous. New Year's Eve.
Is that any good?
No, it's awful. All of George Clooney's early films are terrible. There's no point going back and.
What's the Horror High is god awful.
Yeah, Return to Horror
High. Yeah.
His other big one from the 60s, again, the sort of was Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, which was a kind of a big kind of 60s.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
But he's been on everything. He's been on The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Outer Limits, Dr. Kildare, Get Smart, like I Spy. Like if there's a TV show you can name about like cops or spies, he's been in it. He's just one of those like all-American dudes with the big chin who eked out a career on TV doing the occasional movie part, I think.
All right.
But he says the best line in the movie, which is, studying snakes is your thing, stomping on them is my thing. Speaking of snakes, I'm going to go relieve the reptile. Which was like my favorite line in the whole movie. I'm like, why can't we just have Robert Culp say shit like that for 2 hours? Why am I watching, boring people change into denim?
Who was it that was riding with him? majority of the time.
The doctor, the Benjamin
doctor.
Horne from
Okay.
Twin Peaks, the
Gotcha.
Richard Beymer is the actor.
Gotcha. I dug their rapport a little bit. They were trying for something. I mean, it didn't quite connect, but you know what I mean.
That's the best scene in the movie. Like the doctor talking to the detective is the best scene in the movie, and it's again one of those things that kind of blows my mind is that there's definitely ingredients here for a film. I just don't, with the best will in the world to Monty Hellman, because I do like Two Lane Blacktop, and he did help make Reservoir Dogs happen. Outside of that, he should not have directed this movie. I feel like you could have got
outside of his wheelhouse. I don't understand. I wish there was a little more on it. Like why him? Why this?
Right.
I'm sure it seems like he probably would. I assume he would have jumped at the chance to direct anything. But why him? Why this at this time? Yeah.
Right, but also, as someone who sort of sat and watched a lot of straight-to-video 80s and 90s action movies and straight-to-video 80s and 90s horror, there were enough, jobbing directors out there who were pretty good at either blowing stuff up or stabbing someone in the face. There was guys out there who knew how to do it quickly, cheaply, knock it out to video, move on to the next thing. You know what I mean? And you kind of think, why is a name like Monty Hellman making this film? It's kind of
no doubt.
The one other thing, I quite like the fact that when they decide to block the door, instead of, I don't know, locking it or or putting a chair in front of it or something, they cumbersomely wheel a piano in. What was that about? There's so many decisions in this movie. Like this, more than the second one where everyone's clearly having fun. In this one, there's just some questions I have,
Yeah.
There's just some moments where I'm like, really, Monty? You looked at it and went, how about we spend 10 minutes wheeling a fucking piano in front of the door? I just don't know why I would bother. There's a bit at the end where she's like, use your power, she says, and then never does at all. She's blind, so they contrive to get her to a house where she knows every section of it, presumably so the actress didn't need to act blind too much. And it wasn't a lot of sort of, where am I bollocks? But then, then don't make her blind then. It's not like the blind... I suppose they're doing the whole, well, if you're blind, then you get a sixth sense or something, but whatever. Just make her telepath. Just make her carry and get on with it.
Didn't everything rounded out in the basement with some kind of building collapse of some sort, or not a building collapse, but he had to work his way around all sorts of stuff, and she knew the lay of the land.
Yeah, that's how they have the not very exciting conclusion to this movie. Yes.
Right. I'm sorry, it's coming to me now. Yeah.
And in the end, Ricky just kind of falls over, I think. It's just... He kills...
but there was no big, huge finale there.
No.
Okay, I wanted to love it for the Mosley, but it just, just kind of flatlined for me. I'm honestly, it was only 6 weeks ago I saw this thing. I'm having trouble remembering it.
Yeah, and it's one of those movies where you're like, well, I understand on the page how blind girl trapped in a house where she knows more than the killer knows because she knows every nook of this house. Blind girl outwits killer in tense cat and mouse sequence at the end of the film. I can see how it's written, but that's not how it's directed or played at all. So,
yeah, there was no real payoff for her condition.
No.
Ultimately, it's. That was the payoff. It just wasn't much of one. Wasn't a good one. I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I would probably need to watch this one again to really, take it all in. But I don't know if I ever will.
No, never watch this again. This is the most of all of them. So what's interesting about these two that we're talking about, 3 and now going on to 4, is that 3 has all of the elements and does nothing with them particularly, and it's very, very boring. 4 has a ton of the elements, does everything with them, and is as equally boring because it doesn't make any sense, and you give up. Like within 20 minutes, you're like, I've given up following whatever it is that users trying to do with this fucking thing, and and then you're just bombarded with Yuzna style images, and then then the movie ends. So what's weird is, I think having seen the third one, Yuzna's probably like, oh, I can make a rollicking bonkers gonzo mad Reanimator style horror movie. I made Society and shit. Like, I can go ahead and make a bunch of mad stuff that'll, excite people and whatever. But again, he almost goes Yuzna to the power of 10. You know what I mean? Like, he goes to Yuzna in this one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I as soon as I saw Yuzna in the credits, I was expecting something wet, and we got wet, but not. I don't know, not necessarily the wet I was thinking about. I mean, he somehow infused, all the traditional Yuzna tropes into a Silent Night, Deadly Night format.
It's not even a Silent Night, Deadly Night format, because it's not even at Christmas, really.
It's Yuzna at Christmas.
Yeah, it's Yuzna's Christmas after Yuzna comes off watching about 5 or 6 Argento movies and Cronenberg movies in a row, and fueled on cocaine and Reanimator friends. He gets together
exactly on a nickel.
On a nickel, yeah. So he's like,
on a silent, yeah.
Get me all the friends I can find who'll still come and work for me for a penny. Steal a bunch of shit from Argento that doesn't make any sense. Steal some stuff from Cronenberg. Throw in a bunch of stuff from Society and Reanimator and all the other Yuzna stuff. Didn't he do? He did Return of the Living Dead 3 and stuff. Throw all of that stuff in together, and have Richard Band come back and redo the Reanimator soundtrack at Christmas. That'll be so Deadly Night Part 4.
Initiation,
yeah.
Which,
I mean, it's yeah.
I guess would refer to the. I didn't write her name down, but the female lead character,
Kim Levitt, who's played by Neith Hunter. And Neith Hunter would have a prestigious softcore career in the kinds of things like the Red Shoe Diaries and things that would litter Skinamax in the 90s.
Well, interesting, because my first note is in regards to a game of coital Twister.
Yes.
Like what? Yeah. Where they literally interlock crotches, her and her boyfriend in the film. They interlock crotches and literally just twist around for a bit, fully nude.
Yeah.
But I can't get there first because I have to mention Clint Howard and the Falling Lady of Ass Char.
Yes.
Which is
friend of the show, Clint Howard, yes.
Fully describes the opening sequence. I don't need to say another word. Clint Howard and the Falling Lady of Ass Char. Put all that in your mind right now, and you've got the first scene. Yeah,
first scene, done. I think that's probably what it said in the script.
Yes.
As Brian Yuzna did another line of coke off a large rubbery insect dong or something that he had lying around.
Now, Clint is playing a character named Ricky.
Yes.
Any significance to this? I can't imagine this is Ricky, is it?
I don't think so. I've no idea, but I don't think so. If so, it's probably the 17th actor to play Ricky at this point in the franchise. But yeah, it's such a weird one, isn't it? Because it's about. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, the main lady, her name is Kim. She plays kind of a reporter / detective, and I kind of boiled it. This movie's basically Naked Lunch meets V.I. Warshawski.
Meets the Mother of Tears trilogy or whatever that Argento. It's because essentially there's a coven of witches run by Maud Adams and another old lady who are feeding insects to women. I think so that more insects hatch, more giant penis worms are born out of their bodies, but they have to like pass them through their bodies in really grotesque ways, like basically through their vagina.
That's what they're prepping Kim for, right?
Yeah, through the vagina, out the mouth. That's
she
the
has
way
one of these slug things, and it's at this point where I'm like, Christmas, bro.
Well, there's nothing to do with Christmas in this movie. So Maud Adams is running a coven of witches out of a library, and during an initiation, a woman, her of the ass char, flies off a roof, burns up, and dies. Ricky, played by Clint Howard, lives on the roof of the library, and I don't know, breeds insects or has sex with insects. I'm not quite sure, but he's part of the coven. Like he's friend to the coven, and helps them out.
Oh well, he's the one. Yeah, I mean, go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to spoil the end. No,
he just helps out with the anytime you need a giant vagina worm, he'll show up with one that he's been cultivating on the roof.
At the end, though, him and Kim make that disturbing connection, if I'm not mistaken.
What, when he's wearing the dildo mask?
Maybe.
What ending are you talking about? Because, again, I remember some of this. I don't remember all of it.
I think they consummated. I think they had sex there at the end. Clint Howard and Kim.
In the fever dream where he's wearing the eyes wide shut dildo mask?
I want to say he may have been wearing a mask at first, but I think the scene ended disturbingly with like the close-ups of his face throughout the encounter.
I think it may have also flashed to his buttocks, but you couldn't tell the difference. I think that might have happened. Like, am I looking at
ass?
Yeah, am I looking at Clint face or am I looking at Clint ass? Does it make a difference?
The one thing I don't think we're saying enough of, though, we've got the Coven of Witches, we've got Clint Howard dressed as Santa, acting like a weirdo. Not much, maybe some Christmas lights thrown about. Otherwise, not much mention of Christmas. But
don't they go to Hank's? Don't they go to Hank's family? Sorry.
Let me say this real quick. There's a fuck ton of bugs in this movie.
Right.
I don't know. Have we said that yet? I mean, there's just like it's a bug movie. It's like a Brian Yuzna Reanimator style.
I'm telling you, he watched Suspiria and he watched The Fly, Cronenberg's The Fly, back to back, and was like,
Fly, right?
For my next movie, I want larvae, pupa, I want bugs, I want, disgusting. Because isn't the dream sequence in The Fly where Gina Davis dreams about like giving birth to a giant larvae or whatever?
Oh, that's at the beginning of part 2. Yeah.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yes, that's at the beginning of part 2. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's exactly pretty much on the level of what's going on here.
Right. So you have all that. You have the cockroaches, obviously. You have bugs. Everyone's covered in bugs. He's covered in bugs. Everyone is covered in bugs. But that is totally from that's an Argento or a Giallo move of like there being, because throughout Giallos there's always bugs, or throughout like Argento's movies there's always bugs, because it's that idea of like the world behind the wall is filled with bugs, you know. Like the sea. And even think about the beginning of Blue Velvet with the severed ear is like covered in bugs. Like there's bugs throughout these kind of things to kind of intimate the, you know, the darkness and seedy underbelly of whatever's going on behind the wall or behind the floorboards or whatever. And what's going on here is there's a bunch of witches whose primary goal seems to be feeding large vagina worms to people who then vomit them back up, and then they go, "Congratulations, you've passed
exactly
the initiation.
What's the fucking point?
You have to now have sex with Clint Howard." And then you're like, "Yeah, but what do I get from this? Like, what do I get from this? I don't get, like, it's not like at the end she gets like a big cake or something. She doesn't get anything. She doesn't get money or fame or whatever. Nothing happens."
I do have a note here, another Yuzna trademark, bendy fingers and charred antlers.
Yes, so there is the sequence where her fingers, much like society, melt into each other and go all bendy and weird. And in fact, Screaming Mad George did do the special effects for this movie, much like he did in Society.
I don't know. I was somewhat pleasantly surprised that it went a weird direction, but I don't know, man. This thing is, I don't know. It's hard to put my finger on it, you know? It's, I'm not sure why this film exists. Seems like there was enough budget there to get it done. Plenty of budget to get the effects. I don't know if maybe Yuzna just does those on his own dime or something. I don't know. All of his films are they're wet like this. But ultimately, I just it doesn't figure into the rest of the series. I don't understand why it even exists. Really, it's hard to recommend or.
What's even?
It's obviously it's a terrible film. I mean, if I didn't mention that, it's god awful.
It's not as you know. There is at least a couple of scenes and indeed a cast list that, you know, will keep you mildly more entertained than Part 3, but it's not a better film. It's as bad as Part 3. And weirdly enough, if you said to me which one did you want to rewatch, I'd probably rewatch 3 before this one, even though I think so too. Even though I don't like either of them.
Hey, we didn't mention Reggie Bannister. So that was nice to see him in here during this era.
Nice to see the Reg Man show up. The thing with this is that there is there is a weird subplot, which is I'm a woman who writes the obituaries or keeps up the calendar or whatever of a newspaper, but what I really want to be is an investigative journalist. And I live in a world where even the guy I'm sleeping with to get ahead, who I think is Hank, was that her boyfriend's name who she's doing Naked Twister with at the beginning of the movie? Was it Hank?
Possibly.
Or was it Jeff?
The coital twister.
I don't know if it was Hank or Jeff. No, it was Hank. It was definitely Hank. Played by Tommy Hinckley, who's been in a bunch of stuff, actually. Hank from this has shown up in a bunch of different stuff. But she's sleeping with Hank on her lunch break. I think the idea being is that she sort of assumes he'll put in a good word with Reggie Bannister, who seems to be the chief in these parts. Instead, she comes up against a volley of misogyny. There's then this weird scene, which is, I think, attempting to tie it into Christmas, where she goes round to Hank's family on Christmas, and there's this really weird, awkward scene. And is that meant to be Hank's brother or Hank's kid? Like, I have no idea what's going on there.
True. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and the father and the mother are being bonkers. The father's being all like Republican and crazy.
I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, which is all mad. Then she gets really angry at Hank and whatever. Anyway, she's determined to solve the case of Charas, and what ends up happening is she gets
Her ass indeed gets charred, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, her ass gets all sorts of things done to it. I mean, again, as much as I'm a fan of the exploitation movie, I began to feel sorry for Neith Hunter because, 3 scenes into the movie, and every single scene, she's got her breasts out. like
yeah.
Yuzna
Now that you mention that, I'd probably watch 4 again over 3.
What, just for the Neith breasts?
Yeah, and it's wet. It's definitely wet.
It's a very wet film. I'm wet and I'm covered in bugs. A Brian Yuzna production.
I think that should be said. If you're going into this looking for what you normally find in a Yuzna production, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. Just don't be expecting much of a Christmas story and you'll be okay. But I think, Yuzna fans will be delighted by this one if you haven't seen it.
Well, yeah, I mean, this isn't even like Halloween 3, where at least Halloween 3 is set on Halloween and has something to do with Halloween. This is... What's really weird about Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 4 and Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 5 is the Yuzna connection, which is this. Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 4 is definitely a Yuzna film, right? It's like you say, it's wet, it's covered in bugs, it's completely mad, it doesn't make any sense. He's got a bunch of his friends in there, but what they're doing, no one knows, and then it just fucking ends and no one's any the wiser. There's boobs, there's goo, there's bugs, there's vagina worms, and that's it. Part 5, which is a fairly standard... Part 5 is, I'm pretty sure they've also used a very similar plot in like a Buffy episode or something. Like Part 5 is a very like standard horror idea, or maybe a Tales from the Crypt like idea, or whatever it is. It's very A to B. There's no wild flights of fancy. There's no like, giant bugs or anything. Like it's a normal movie. And yet Yuzna is involved as a producer and a writer in that one. And again, weirdly has both Neith Hunter, who played Kim in this movie, and Clint Howard, who played Rick in this movie, show up again in Part 5 for no really good reason, except to like weirdly link the two. And yet, Silent Night Part Deadly Night Part 5 could be said to be at least, it's definitely a Christmas story. It could definitely be a Silent Night movie. It's in the tradition of Halloween 3. Maybe it's not about Ricky killing people anymore, but it's a story onto its own that's set at Christmas and, would tie into at least the theme. So what makes 4 the total weird one is that it's not about anything. And if it was just like Yuzna showed up when I have the script and the producer says you can only make it if you call it Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 4, that would make sense. But the fact that Yuzna then goes on to do Part 5, and Part 5 has a totally different vibe to Part 4 and is fairly standard, that's where that's what I don't understand. Like, did Yuzna just have these 2 scripts kicking about, and one was totally mad and the other one was normal, and he's like, well, I can get Maud Adams and Mickey Rooney on the phone. I just don't know how any of this works.
Yeah. Let me maybe now's a good time. Let me read a quote from Mickey Rooney in relation to the first film. And this is regarding all the outrage regarding the first film. Mickey Rooney was quoted as saying, "How dare they? I'm all for the First Amendment, but don't give me Santa Claus with a gun going to kill somebody. The scum who made that movie should be run out of town." And then, just a few years later, he's signed on for Silent Night, Deadly Night 5. So I thought that was interesting, or at least worth sharing. But hello?
Yeah, no, I'm hearing you. I'm just
Okay. Sorry.
it's like
Sorry.
Mickey Rooney in the early 80s being like, how do I get relevant again? I know, I'll rail against this thing. And then...
Exactly. That was how I felt. That's how that read to me.
And then 6 years later,
yeah.
I'm going to eat crow and crawl back to the franchise I want shit on.
Pretty much.
Because they're the only game in town offering me a main role.
One thing that I could put my finger on in regards to Yuzna, his involvement in this is, and I won't spoil it, or we'll maybe spoil it later, but I think the final scene may have been slightly intriguing to him from an effects standpoint. Not sure. I don't know. I'm with you. I can't fathom. I mean, obviously somebody had some money for a couple of pictures, and you know, they were willing. You know, I believe somebody somewhere had 2 pictures in mind that they were willing to make, and they had assigned dollar values to each. And I don't know. From there, I don't know how the scripts came into play. You know,
yeah,
but you're right.
If this was like a Corman thing, and him and his wife were like, well, we'll get Yuzna on the phone because he did Reanimator and Society, and they've kind of been mild hits. So let's get him in, and he can just direct a couple of these scripts that are littering up my desk, and we'll call them Silent Night. Like, if it was like that, like a bit with the Slumber Party Massacre stuff, where, you know, Jim Wynorski comes on and goes, well, I'm going to make these movies tie into Slumber Party Massacre, and Corman's wife is just like, great, do it, whatever you want. Like, if it was that kind of setup, but I don't even know who the production company is for this. It's called Still Silent Films, which sounds like one of those that is made up in order to just release this movie.
One of them, I think 3 was Quiet Films, 4 was Silent Films, 5 was Still Silent Films. I'm glad you said that because I have this note here and I had no idea what that meant. So yeah, Still Silent.
Yeah. So
and 5 is the toy maker. By the way, if we didn't say that. So,
but there's nothing here. I mean, I'm just looking. I'm trying to see if there's any trivia where it says that these were movies that were, you know, called this in order to distribute them or something.
Right. Yeah, they could have been made under a different handle.
Like actress,
maybe it was just called The Toy Maker, and then they it became Part 5 later. Who knows?
Like actress Neith Hunter plays a character with the same name as previous film in the series, which we've already said, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 4. But both films had completely different people in charge of casting. So the only thing that kind of explains that is Yuzna. Same with Conan Yuzna, who's got to be his son, I guess. Is in both movies, even though apparently 2 different people are credited as casting directors in both films, which also seems odd because they're definitely made back to back. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they made the whole damn thing as one big movie and then split it into 2. Like, I don't know.
Could be, and those characters could be the same characters, but it's just completely irrelevant to the plot of the 5th film. They're not.
But yeah, it's
do no service.
It's so odd that these 2 movies get made. I tell you what, I've got to assume that they made these movies. Yuzna was shopping them around town, and someone, you know, said, here's this dormant franchise. If you slap the name Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 4 and Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 5 on these 2 movies, we can distribute them as something. I just don't know how else this...
I'm sure it was something like that.
Yeah.
Who knows? But it's... this 5th entry, it's kind of like your standard boilerplate, melodrama. What happens? I'll say what happens throughout the film, while not exciting, is worth sitting through to get to the ending. I think that this film is all about the ending. And I don't know how much I want to say about it because I think the film is so dependent upon it, but I'll never forget that scene for the rest of my life. It takes a strange turn. I mean, if you listen to the character names, you can figure out what's going on. I'm sorry. What's the actor's name? I'm sorry, I forget his name.
Mickey Rooney, or the guy who's playing his son.
His son, right? Those 2 characters. If you can figure out what's going on if you pay attention to those character names. But I did not call that ending. I don't know. It's disturbing on a particular level uh, of the subconscious, perhaps. I don't know. There's maybe some Freudian shit going on there. There's some uncanny valley. I mean, there's all sorts of shit going on in that final scene that just it's a head scratcher. It's everything. It's rest of the movie not so much, but that final scene, it was a hell of a payoff.
Well, what I thought was odd about this film, and again, I it may be, and I've got this more of this like 4 and 5 theory, with Screaming George doing so much work on 4, and then coming over to 5. I've got a feeling that like 5 was already being shot, and I'll explain what I mean before like Screaming George came over, because the concept, very quickly for people who don't know, there's a toy maker played by Mickey Rooney in town. There's some story about the fact that his store used to be a lot more popular, and now he's kind of being run out of town by the Toys R Us's of the world.
I think a couple of his toys have harmed some kids, so he's got a bit of a bad rap. He thinks there's somebody out there,
Trying
deliberately,
to get him.
deliberately fouling up sabotaging some of his toys to make him look bad.
Oh, right, that's it. Yes, there's that whole backstory about yes, because then the guy who ends up being sort of the main guy in this movie, who is that William Thorne, who plays Derek, who just shows up in the leather jacket guy.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's kind of maybe a red herring, or
yeah. Well, he and Tracy Higginson, right, is the mother, right? Yeah. So not his mother, but not his mother.
No, I know the little boy's mother.
The little boy's mother. So, so his toys have maybe harmed someone. Anyway, toys keep showing up on people's front doorstep and killing them, essentially, without going into too much ins and outs. And initially, the first, whatever it is, 2 or 3 kills, and the first couple of trips to the toy store with Mickey Rooney or whatever, it just kind of plods along. In fact, the first kill with the father finding the little sphere that kind of attacks him at the beginning is almost laughable. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of silly. It's very cheap, flimsy, silly, and awful. And while it's kind of fun, the whole like my toy has come alive and is killing my dad in front of my eyes, it's still silly. Well, it at least throws back to the idea of childhood trauma, I guess, because the child then spends the next few scenes in the film comatose and reacting violently to things, but in general, that opening sequence is a bit silly, and then there's a couple of other sequences where people die where it isn't very exciting. However, when you get to that sequence, this is what I mean, where I think like the director of this one, Martin Kitrosser, who also weirdly has a Quentin Tarantino connection in this. I suppose everyone does if they stay in Hollywood long enough. But he was script supervisor on Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Kill Bill 1 and 2. He and Death Proof. Yeah. Which, if anyone had seen, well, not only that, but he's credited as a character creator for Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. He writes the screenplay for Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. He does Meatballs 2 for the story for Meatballs 2. So we need to speak to Kit Rosser and figure out what the hell's going on. But I'm saying, I think he got this movie underway, right, and started to film a bunch of scenes. Because when you get to the sequence in the middle where the couple get killed by the whole fleet of toys, and you've got, saw blades coming out and stabbing things coming out and people being shot with toy guns and stuff like that, and there's blood flying everywhere and, people's ankles and stuff. That is such a fun sequence. Like, that's such an awesome, gory, weird, whacked out, mad sequence that I think that was the day that Yuzna and, if this movie was made chronologically, that was the day Yuzna and Mad George showed up from part 4 and was like, we're here now, what do you need us to do? And that's when the film becomes like, because to me the second half of this movie really takes off. The first half of the movie is just boring, but by the second half of the movie you've got the couple get killed by all these mad toys with razor blades and guns and stabbing things and whatever. Then you've got the revelation that the guy who's hunting the toy maker, the guy in the leather jacket who's also faking being Santa earlier on in the movie, who the kid ran away from, is really the kid's father and ex-lover of the mother, like out of nowhere, and they end up having sex in the... They can end up having sex in the back of the car. Well, because I think Yuzna came in and was like, okay, where's the sex scenes? And the guy was like, well, we had the couple where they got killed in the bed. And he was like, yeah, but like, come on, we need more than that. He was like, right, I'm making the guy in the leather jacket who nobody fucking cares about. He's going to be the secret ex-lover and weirdly the father of the comatose kid. And we're going to have a bong fest in the back of the car. Mark Kit Russell was like, what? He's like, shut up, Kit Russell, just film it. I'm Yuzna, I know what I'm doing. So I feel like that happened. And then, because the rest of the movie, I love the second half of part 5. And I saw the reveal of the end of part 5 coming, but I still loved the way they did it. It was super mad. Oh, oh shit! Yeah, no, the genital-less boy humping the mother. That was amazing. That was amazing. That's Yuzna. Kit Russell didn't want any part of that. That's Yuzna and Screaming George showing up, being like, no, he's got to hump the mother. Kit Russell being like, no, he can't hump the mother. It's too grotesque. And Yuzna being like, you don't know what you're talking about, Kit Russell. Get off my set. And Yuzna took over. I'm telling you. Meanwhile, the corpse of Mickey Rooney in the background. Yuzna's like, I always wanted a sequence where a genital-less Ken doll humps a woman in front of the corpse of Mickey Rooney, and I'm going to make it happen. Oh, Rooney's not lying down. He's not doing that for anybody. They're not paying him. They're not paying him enough cheese sandwiches to get on a cold basement floor. Now, make no mistake, it's probably because Richard Band, who's obviously a friend of Brian Yuzna because he did the music for Reanimator, which his brother Charles Band put out with Empire Pictures. There's got to be, if this wasn't a rejected Full Moon script, or indeed a script that Yuzna took to Full Moon only to go take it somewhere else and make it somewhere. I mean, the idea of small shit coming alive and killing things, that is Charles Band's wheelhouse. I'm very surprised that Band did not jump on this. He's done 75 Puppet Master films, there's Doll Man, there's the Bong films, he produces Stuart Gordon's Dolls, which is also another one. If it can be miniaturized and if it can kill someone, Charles Band's your guy. So I'm a bit surprised old Band didn't show up as a producer on this one. Like I say, I can only assume that Yuzna was like, no, I'm gonna take it over here and do it over here instead. Yeah, I mean, Richard Band's. We didn't really talk about this, but Richard Band's music for Part 4 is just the Reanimator theme. I mean, Yuzna just, considering that was his success story, Yuzna starts every movie with the same, like, coloured images floating around on a black background with that white font from Reanimator with the, like, the Richard Band trying to do Bernard Herrmann
exactly Psycho score, yeah. I definitely I want to take this one in again. I don't think I've given this a fair run. I think I was so after 3 and 4, I was just kind of plowing forth through this series, not really expecting much.
This is sort of the movie where if I was on the board at like Scream Factory or something, and they've already put out the first 2, I'd say don't even bother with 3 and 4. I mean, by all means, or don't even bother with 3. I mean, by all means, like put it out on a vanilla disc or something, but like don't give it a big fanfare. And then I would say, do a double disc special edition or even triple disc special edition Brian Yuzna wet Blu-ray double bill of 4 and 5 with mad special features and Yuzna and Screaming Mad George talking about how like they added all this craziness to the films, and Clint Howard to do a documentary or something. And I would pay good money for that, for like the 4-5 double bill. That I would.
They actually have I think you mentioned it when we first started talking about recording this, but they have a 3-4-5 DVD set.
But there's no extras. I think it's out of.
Is there no extras? Okay.
There's no extras.
And also, it's worth mentioning that 3, 4, and 5 can also be seen for free on the Tubi app, TUBI.
Not anymore. But they're
on. Is it off of there?
They're off of there, but they're on Vudu for free. If you have Vudu, you can watch them Vudu for free.
Okay. I had Silent Night. I had Part 3 on a 4-pack DVD set. I've had it for years and just never seen it. It was also included. I think Repossessed was also in the 4-pack.
Yeah, I have that disc as well.
So, and then 4 and 5 I was able to catch on Tubi. So, I mean, it's no harm, no foul. They didn't cost me a nickel to watch. So, but 5 I wouldn't mind taking another look at. Like I said, the ending was very, very memorable.
Well, and 5 should be, it should be totally said that 5 can be watched completely independently of the others. There is... with each sequel, the tangential connection to the first one grows fainter and fainter, and by the 5th one, there is no connection. You could release this as Brian Yuzna or Martin Kitross's The Toy Maker on a new Blu-ray, release it uncut, add extra doll humping and blood and bloodletting and tits. Get Yuzna all over that to do some wet commentary, possibly while, I don't know, rubbing his thighs with Swarfiga jelly, and then
lathering himself with maple syrup,
lathering himself up with Vaseline, and then you've got yourself a buyer. I think both me and Axel would go ahead and purchase that baby in a heartbeat.
Well, yeah, I when I first agreed to this show, I had forgotten, or I hadn't thought it through all the way through to including a remake and the damn retrospective. But alas, here we go.
Yeah, plowing into the Stephen C. Miller joint of the simply titled Silent Night from 2012. And
2012.
Let's try and race through this, shall we?
Well, okay, and and we all, your history or opinion on remakes is unwavering and has been well stated, and I imagine that would apply to this film.
It would apply to 50% of this film.
Okay. Oh, well, yeah. Let's just jump into it. First off, a difference, I guess, in mythos, or just differences from the original. The killer's wearing a mask. It's kind of like a cutout plastic clear Santa mask, where he cuts the bottom portion of the mask out to where his mouth shows. I kind of like the look. Kind of applies that blank slasher mask canvas with the Santa thing.
Yeah, I mean the big thing with this movie is that it starts with the Santa killer all grown up and putting together his killing outfit of the Santa suit, but with, like you say, this kind of scary top half of his face. So it's one of those see-through plastic masks with sort of some cheek rouge and like a little bit of a nose or whatever painted on, that he's putting on over the top half of his face with the beard on the bottom half, to basically be a killer Santa in this small town, clearly shot in Canada, and that's where the movie starts. He's killing people in the basement of an old house, and off he goes. And it's a very standard slasher film from there on in. It doesn't have either the storylines or the flashbacks or anything of the franchise it's taking its name from. And they do
try to shoehorn a little bit of a backstory towards the end, but it's really, you know what I mean? It's not incredibly effective, or I can't even hardly remember what the damn information was. You know what I mean?
The twist is that her father, so Jamie King plays a small town policewoman with Malcolm McDowell as the sheriff, and a couple of other guys in a very small sleepy town.
How the fuck does like a 70-year-old British man become the sheriff of small town USA? I mean, is that? I know it's. I know it's done that way on purpose to be absurd, but
right. Well, I think this is Malcolm McDowell, much in the way that Donald Pleasance would occasionally add a little twang to Dr. Loomis, so that he wasn't just an Englishman. I think Malcolm McDowell is trying to do a little of a accent. I don't think he's going full blown Hugh Laurie House, but he's doing. There is a little a snarl and a little different in vowel sounds in the A's that I think he's attempting in order to try and at least maybe be a mid-Atlantic sheriff.
Transatlantic.
Yeah, or maybe he's...
Really, I do.
Yeah, maybe he's just lived in America long enough that that's how he sounds now. I don't know, but...
he does swing for the fences, though. I really enjoy the way he plays this. I don't know. Did you get any mileage out of his character?
No, I see the thing that bothers. If this movie had been called Silent Night and had everything that it had in it, apart from the two scenes where, for no reason whatsoever, they recreate two sequences from the original Silent Night, Deadly Night movie, only they do them incredibly badly. If that had been the film, no, it wouldn't have been like high on my list, but I would have liked it enough where I would have gone, sure, as a killer Santa slasher movie made in 2012 in Canada with a sort of, it's got that kind of like a lot of the films like Wolf Cop or Hobo with a Shotgun. It's got that thing where it's like, well, we make if it's going to be a slasher film, and it's going to be like have nods to the 80s. It's got to have stupid amount of gore and stupid amount of tits, and it's got to be wacky and weird and Canadian and mad or whatever. Like it falls very strongly into the Hobo with a Shotgun, Wolf Cop 1 and 2 realm of trauma-esque horror films.
You get a trauma vibe from this?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Certainly some of the later trauma stuff.
I see where you're coming from a little bit from the Canada or the Canadian perspective. There is a Canadian edge to it, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's there. But I do think they were trying, like you said, take X and Y away, and you pretty much just have an unoffensive slasher, which is I do think that's what they're going for. I do think one thing where I want to give let me give it some props. The props that I will give it is here's where I think like you said, and I do agree with you that it is it's trying to be, for the most part, 93% of it is just trying to be a straightforward slasher.
Well, not even a slasher. I would say, especially once you get into like the fight between the killer and Donald Logue, where they're doing like the green lighting and the water is coming down from the ceiling and stuff like that. Like, I think it's not just that it's a straightforward slasher. Like it's definitely goofy and heightened and dialed up to 10, you know what I mean, in terms of
at times, yeah. And I was going to mention that too. I did appreciate the lighting schemes, because it was at times it was attempting to have be giallo-esque, and it would have like either the alternating green red or green and red depending on which angle you're of the room you're looking at, and I enjoyed that. I think they tried to do that more so than any of the other films in the series. But I think to me, the movie itself, just from a pure entertainment perspective, it gets off on a little bit of a bad start because the first kill is kind of iffy.
Yeah.
It was where he kind of strangles them with the Christmas lights. And I like the way the scene looks, because it has one of those Santas kind of lit up in the background, and it looked really nice, but then like the payoff wasn't there, so then you're like, that maybe that was part of the Canadian edge. I don't know.
Well, it also started off having that kind of Saw vibe, where everything is sort of that greeny, grey, browny. Like a lot of these horror movies, especially the ones that are shot on digital, they get into the edit suite, they look at the control board, they go, oh my god, look at all the color correction I can do, and then they just like go hog wild. The Evil Dead remake had the same thing, this kind of like greeny, browny, looked like someone vomit on the screen. However, as this movie continues, they change it up, and there is actually some attempt at lighting and style and some other stuff that I really did appreciate. And the funny thing is while I would never give this like a 10 out of 10, if you knocked out the two main references to the early movie...
What was the other one?
So there's the going to see the grandfather, which...
Right, which was completely stupid. I hate that scene.
I don't even know why it's in the movie.
It was so poor. It was poorly done, and it was just out of place. It didn't need to be. It was simply exists as a reference, and that's it's irritating that it exists. Yeah, it really derailed the movie.
Well, also, it's not like how you can't hope to redo what that actor does in the original. No. That actor is so bananas in the original that trying to redo it with just some guy who looks like an accountant sat in a chair, like it was awful. And then the second one was the Linnea Quigley reference, where the naked chick gets impaled on the antlers. Okay. And it was all CGI and awful. What I would have done is if you remove those two scenes and I don't know, for my money, Troma'd it or Canadian'd it down a notch and a half, or just half a notch maybe.
Yeah. Some more physical effects as opposed to digital blood.
This comes down to one of those things again, like there's a fine line in movies like this between, and it's always going to be the case because the people who are making these movies have seen all the movies that you and I love, so therefore obviously they're going to try and ape them, right? But there's this fine line between writing a cool character or writing a cool sequence or writing something that's over the top or something that's a bit different or something that's a bit weird, and seeing something like, for example, Donald Pleasence's performance in Halloween and going, how do I get a Dr. Loomis-like character in my film? I'm not saying that that's in this movie. I'm just saying that someone who's watched something like that, or someone who's watched, I can't think off the top of my head right now, but imagine like a slightly, or Roddy McDowall in Fright Night, or whatever it is. Like there's one thing writing an original character and it being cool and over the top, and there's another thing seeing a cool over the top character in another movie and trying to do that again. The strength of this particular movie is when it does its own thing. When it does its own thing, I really, really like it. The Donald Logue character in it, I really, really like that character. I really like the irascible cynic, politics spouting madman who's just like, fuck Christmas and fuck everything to do with it.
Oh, he was so great. I love him in almost everything, but yeah, I ultimately I don't. I mean, he was ultimately just a red herring, but I did enjoy the time spent with him on screen.
Right, but I tell you why. I mean, because you feel that not only that actor, but also the writer and director wanted that, like, knew that character, wanted to write that character, and Donald Logue wanted to perform that character. Like, it felt, even though it's jokey, even though it's obviously making a bunch of,
I could say the same for Malcolm. I think he had a blast. I mean, I'm sure the whole time he was like, "You're paying me for this."
No.
Let me say one line of his real quick.
Sure.
He says, "Don't go playing the hero. That's my job."
Yeah. The only thing I thought about his role is that someone wrote that to be a cool sheriff rather than. Do you know what I mean?
I wonder if they're just like, you know what, you're Malcolm McDowell. I'm going to let you run with this.
The good news, Axel...
I like that better, but...
Yeah, the good news, Axel, is that I can't really be down on this movie. There was tons I really liked about this movie.
I'm shocked. But I feel exactly... my opinion in this film 100% aligns with yours, except I think I had a lot more fun with Malcolm McDowell, including... he did have his own badass theme as well too, kind of like a, Western hero theme when he rolled on the scene. I got a lot of mileage out of him.
Yeah, I mean the big things is I would remove the homages.
Grandpa.
Well, I would remove the homages to both the original and other horror movies. There's a tons of like horrible cliched. References to a bunch of stuff. I would tighten up the twist because it doesn't really work. The twist essentially is that
it's all there at the end too. It's in the last. It's all kind of given to you in one big go there at the end, and it doesn't really stick.
No, because are we meant to think that the Santa who's killing everyone now is the burn victim from that sequence?
Right. Yeah, I mean it, and it's just not even if it is, it's just okay.
Well, because wouldn't he have been? Well, I mean, because wouldn't he have been horribly burnt up? And if the police were there, wouldn't he have been taken away? And okay, if he's a zombie killer, doesn't that need to be established? Like,
or why would we have?
It's
why
not
would he
it's not
not be known about.
Right. It's right. Like, because the father even says earlier on in the movie, like, it's what's her name? The character's name?
It's like LJ, or you're talking about the main
Bradimore. He goes, a Bradimore doesn't walk away from a killer Santa, or something like that, he says. And you're like, well...
Oh, Malcolm.
No, her father.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm with you now.
The guy who is the cop in the flashback at the end, who is also the guy who always plays the town sheriff, and the guy who's then has his guts all cut out. Mm-hmm. He says to her, halfway through the movie, a Bradimore never runs away from a killer Santa. And he's referencing the fact that when he was a sheriff or policeman or whatever, he killed, or thought he killed, a Santa. Which would be fine, except that when... And look, I'm not trying to look for too much logic, but if a policeman killed a Santa by setting him on fire, which is what we see in the flashback at the end, that body, it's not like they would just be like, well, I guess he's dead and everyone would go home. That body would be taken somewhere, right? And even if you're going to say, well, it went to the morgue and then the body walked out of the morgue because really he's a zombie, or he wasn't really dead, or he's just scarred up, or whatever. Either way, he either would be in prison or he would be known about, and they'd be like, what about that zombie that walked out of the morgue who was killing everyone dressed as Santa? Like, you just, there was too many questions. For a twist to work, it can't just be she was the girl in the back of the car. Like, there has to be something where you go, oh, okay, that was the killer. And I think the
twist does not work, because I even as you sit here and explain it, I don't remember this. You know what I mean? I just don't. I enjoyed the whole damn movie. It's not like they spent
they spent
a long
two
time
bits on
setting it up.
No, they don't spend any time setting it up at all. But I think the problem with the post-Scream slasher thing is that what Scream established in horror films is the idea of the whodunit, or not established, but like brought it back. Like the idea
of unmasking.
Who is actually the killer, right? The Scooby-Doo type thing of it all. Mm-hmm. And the trouble is with this movie is that throughout the movie, it is played as, but who is it? Who is it? Who is it?
Right.
So you can't have, I mean, you can, they did. They did have an ending that didn't make a lick of fucking sense. But you can't have a whole movie where people are like, who is it? Who is it? Who is it? You establish all the characters in the town. You establish the mayor, you establish the sheriff, you establish the ex-policeman who now plays the Santa in the thing. You establish that there's a Santa parade. You establish the dopey sheriff. You establish Angry Jim. You establish the guy who's doing the porn shoot. Like, you flesh out this entire town on this idea of who is it, who is it, who is it? And then the answer is some dude who tried to kill her dad 20 years ago and who her dad set on fire, but, like, we don't know who he is or why he is, and the dad never talks about him. Like, it's...
Yeah, because as good of a job as they did setting up all those characters, I have no complaints about any of those people. I don't think any of them would have been satisfying as a reveal, all the same. So, yeah, they were kind of painting themselves into a corner a little bit. Because, as in the other films, we know who the killer is.
Right.
So they really, they created their own obstacle. I don't know. I probably would have rather gone with something ambiguous,
Well, if you were going to have
the guy was.
Well, they what they do is halfway through the movie, one of them says they talk about a rumor. They say, the rumor of the killer Santa because the father comes home one night or something and his wife and his kid are killed or something, and distraught at Christmas time he turns into a killer Santa or something, and they're like, yeah, that's just an urban legend.
Yeah, I kind of like that.
Right.
That was earlier on, wasn't it? Yeah.
So, I mean,
Somebody dropped that.
I guess if you had, there would have been two ways to have done it. You either would have needed to have established one of the people, let's say Malcolm McDowell, as someone who secretly in the past lost his wife and child and has been harboring, deathly feelings the whole time and therefore becomes an evil killer Santa. Or if you're going to go with it's actually a return of someone my father took down when I was a kid, we need to spend more time with the father and we need to learn more about that case. And I'm not saying that they needed to like bung up this stupid, gory, tit-filled horror film with a bunch of extraneous backstory, but you can't just show me 30 seconds at the end and go, there's your answer, get out the cinema. You know, like you have to do just a little bit more than that. I'm sorry, but you do.
They created their own problem by having him under a mask. That's their own fault, and they couldn't punch their way out of it. Hey, I've got one more quote from
Malcolm McDowell.
From Malcolm is, "Don't put avocado on the burger."
That was my favorite bit in the whole movie. When he doubled down on it, I thought it ruined the joke. But when he said it to begin with, as a throwaway line, "Kid, you're putting avocado on the burger. Don't put avocado on the burger." He's like, "A burger's good enough as it is. Stop trying to put..." Like, I really liked that as a metaphor, and the way Malcolm McDowell did it really sold it. But once he'd done that, and he's like, I think then he said, "Now you're adding grapes or something to the burger," and I'm like, "No, you've ruined it." Like, just the avocado of the burger bit was the good bit.
I can't tell you, because let me tell you, I once I put it together that I'd kind of forgotten the whole remake thing being included in this and the consequences therein. But I can't tell you how pleased I am to have moaned. I moaned through this and really to feel identical, because I do enjoy the film. This is my third time seeing it, and I like it better each time I see it. And I did enjoy this last viewing, so it's refreshing to hear you come with some positivity.
Well, because a few things. First of all, it's not really a Silent Night, Deadly Night remake. It's more inspired by Silent Night, Deadly Night. Here's another Killer Santa movie. And considering we've already had, Black Christmas and the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise and a whole bunch of other rip-offs, Christmas Evil and, Santa's Sleigh.
Better watch out. Yeah,
Santa's Sleigh and stuff like that. To try and do something new in the Killer Santa genre would be a futile gesture if you didn't in some way reference the past. So I don't really begrudge them that. They did enough of their own thing that I'm fine with it. I blame them for being a little too hip. I blame them for being for remaking two of the bits from the original when they didn't need to in any way at all. And I blame them for not really kind of figuring out the ending. Outside of that, it's a splatter-filled, joke-filled, scenery-chewing, tit-filled, Canadian horror movie that's absolutely fine and does what it says on the tin. It suffers for me from that that thing whereby it's a movie made by someone who's watched all the movies I've made, so therefore I'm like, oh, you're being a little lazy here. But outside of that, it has its tongue firmly planted in its cheek. It has a ton of fun with the subject matter. It's got some great deaths in it, lots of sexy chicks running around topless, and a good Killer Santa, and a bunch of great effects, and a really good Donald Logue in a prison cell faces down against an evil Santa sequence, which I really liked. And it's got Malcolm McDowell with a flamethrower. Like, there's a lot to be said for it. It has shortcomings, but I think any movie in 2012 that's going to wade into the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise is going to have some.
Oh yeah, I mean, you consider a 2012 slasher that's also a remake that you and I can both speak positive on.
Yeah,
I mean, give me 5 more of those, please.
Right. I mean, this is what, and the funny thing is, for the this is what I will say, that for the Silent Night Deadly Night franchise, this film works fine because I don't think anyone is going to their grave over the Silent Night Deadly Night franchise. There's just not enough meat on the bone once you get
the
past...
continuity was blown immediately as soon as part 2 started.
There's not enough meat on the bone that people are holding this franchise aloft. In fact, I
it's
asked,
not precious.
No, I asked for comments this afternoon, and most of the comments I got about this franchise was, it's rubbish, don't bother watching it. To which I said, too late. It's not a beloved franchise, and if you have to make a Killer Santa movie with a kind of tongue-in-cheek, then at least have him with a flamethrower. So well done on that. And at least have him feed a topless woman into a wood chipper. Great. We need more of that. That's fine. But it's knockabout. It's stupid. It knows what it is. It's trying to recreate the glories of the past with the shortcomings of the future, and that's absolutely fine. I will take that in a Silent Night 2012 Killer Santa movie. My problem with to go back on the other franchise, you and I have talked at length about, the Friday the 13th franchise. The only reason I bring this up is because I think it kind of explains what I was trying to get at with the Friday the 13th remake. My feeling is the Friday the 13th remake, while maybe not with such humor or such disregard for kind of storytelling in general, but it was definitely made in the same kind of spirit as this one. And I don't think the Friday the 13th franchise should have had a remake made in the same kind of as long as they smoke pot, as long as they get their tits out, and as long as they talk like assholes, we can have Jason show up and just kill a bunch of them and everyone will be happy. That was my problem with the Friday the 13th remake. It works for this particular remake. This tone or this exploitation element or this, half-assed writing does not work for every franchise. For this particular franchise, it works. But I don't think you could go to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise or the Evil Dead franchise or Friday the 13th franchise or whatever and be like, well, if we write something with some tits and guns and gore and knives and someone in a mask or whatever, that'll do, right? I don't think you can do that with those other franchises. I think you can do it with this franchise and shove a Malcolm McDowell in there and have a topless girl in a wood chipper and go, sure, fine, okay. But I just don't know that you can do that with other franchises. That's where I'm coming at it from. And I try. I know people just think to my to the way I talk, like, you just indiscriminately hate anything that's a remake. I will take everything on its own merits based on my personal opinion towards the franchise. So,
you just made me realize that if we did the Prom Night series, we'd have to watch the damn remake.
Oh, the Prom Night has it does have a remake. Yeah, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. And then, then I was going to ask, I actually, while we were talking just now, I went and glanced at the DVD shelf looking for other series. Some other potential series would be, and I don't know if you've already covered, the Elm Street series. And then the Elm Street, of course, has a remake. And then I don't know if you haven't already, I'd be down for the Blade series as well.
I haven't. I've covered one or two of the Elm Street films here and there, but I would definitely do that franchise because of the three main ones, it's probably the one I'm the least familiar with.
Oh, fun. Okay.
I mean, I've seen 1, 2, 3, 4 a few times each. I've seen 5 once. I love New Nightmare. I've seen that probably the most.
Okay, well, that's food for convo. I'm not big on New Nightmare, but it's like I can spend 30 minutes telling you why.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
But in terms of the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise, to wrap this up and to end this behemoth of an episode, just tell me, sir, in what order would you place these 6 films?
1, 2. Remake 3, 5, 4.
Really? You're putting 3 over 5, huh?
I'll take that back. You're right.
I'm just
I better
interested.
do 5, 3, 4.
Okay. So
5, 3, 4.
The wet Brian Yuzna one with the vagina worms is the worst one, in your opinion?
It's just so disconnected. I mean, maybe there's something there. It's bizarre. It's got disturbing Clint Howard sexual faces up close. It's the full Yuzna.
It is Yuzna to the power of Brian, is what it is.
So I mean, just to say that, even I don't know. It's hard to rate it lower than Part 3 because Part 3 is so bad, but that is where the Bill Moseley charm will give it put some wind beneath its wings, because
plus you're a big fan of Canadian tuxedos and poodle mullets. So.
Yes, exactly. Guilty as charged. How about you? How do you rank them?
So 1, 2, definitely. Then I think I'm going 5. Then I think I'm going Remake. Then I think I'm going 4. And then I think I'm going 3. I think that's the order I'm doing it.
3 on the back, yeah.
I put the Remake between 4 and 5. As much as I like both barrels of Yuzna, I can only do that so often in my life.
The full Yuzna. I think I've pronounced his last name every possible way, so hopefully one of them were correct.
Yeah, Yuzna, Yuzna, I don't know. It's fine. It doesn't matter. Anyway, Axel, I'm going to wrap this up, say a very big thank you. This has been yet another classic Cross and Axel go through a franchise episode, and I'm excited by the idea that you want to be the Diners franchise returning champion. I will definitely think of some others. I like the more. I mean, I like what you're suggesting with Nightmare and Prom Night and stuff like that.
Howling.
The Howling interests me because doesn't it go into 7 and 8 and 9? Aren't there a bunch of Howlings that no one's ever seen?
Yeah, I think they did one within the last 7-8 years too. So I want to say there's 7 or 8 films, and I have at least the first 6.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only one the only couple that I would be less interested in doing would be either Puppet Master, because really you should be talking to Tim Gross about that.
No, I'm not. I'd do it if you asked, but I don't have them. Yeah,
or the Hellraiser franchise, which again I happen to have a ton of, but I'm not interested in. Outside of the first 2 or 3, I'm not really. They get shit pretty quick. House I would definitely do. I've not seen 3 or 4 at all, so I would definitely do that. I would do the Howling.
Blade, any interest in Blade?
Not so much, no. And also, I already have my friend David who does comic book movies with me, so I would kind of move away from that. But the one that did go into some future movies that I don't think anyone ever talks about is the Wrong Turn franchise. I would do that.
I've seen 1 and 2. I wouldn't mind, maybe down the line, I wouldn't mind doing that one. I like 1 and 2. I was actually talking about Part 2 earlier today.
Because it goes to Part 6. There's a Wrong Turn 6.
Holy shit.
Came out in 2014. Wrong Turn 6, Last Resort.
Okay. So we're pretty well. I mean, House, Howling, and Elm Street. And then possibly Wrong Turn after that. We've got a nice starting point there. House. How about do that next? Just because that's 4 films, it's not as big of a task.
Oh my God! And you wouldn't believe this, but there is it's called Wrong Turn 2020. I've got to assume that this is a remake. It's a reboot. So again, this is sort of where I get a bit peed off. The last one was in 2014, Wrong Turn 6. right? Don't reboot it. Just do Wrong Turn 7. Doesn't need this is a modern franchise. This isn't like we've dug something up from 1989 and now we're doing a whole new one. You don't need to reboot a franchise that the last part was only 5 years ago. Let's just do a seventh one. Yeah. But no, they consistently made them about every 2 to 3 years throughout the 2000s. So,
okay,
I wouldn't watch.
I will definitely check out part 3, or I don't know. Yeah, shoot, if you give me the assignment, I'll do it. How about that? If and when, I will damn sure take a look at them.
Yeah. What's equally interesting is that it seems like some people come back, like the producers come back. They produce the third one and then come back and produce the fifth and sixth one, but don't produce the fourth one. So anyway,
but hey, how about real quick? I know you gotta go, but how about Sleepaway Camp? Have you done those?
I've done a video review of them, but I don't think I've ever done an audio podcast about them.
Well, maybe put that one on the back. So I mean, we've got like 4 or 5 series there that.
Yeah, when the Blu-rays came out of Sleepaway Camp, I reviewed all 3 of them.
Okay, cool.
Because
I don't have 2 or 3 on Blu. I do have the first. You had the Shout Factory.
Yeah, I've got all 3. 1. Yeah, I've got all 3 that go together.
That release, I actually just mowed through that whole disc the other day. That's like one of my favorite Blu-rays of the past 5 years. I love they have the special feature where they are showing the 2K transfer process. It's just fascinating watching them like live, actually capturing the image.
Well, because of course, what's interesting about Sleepaway Camp is we'd have to also do Return to Sleepaway Camp, and then we'd also have to do. They've released buy it on the internet from some crazies in Des Moines, VHS version of like part 4, which is cobbled together from footage they never ended up using. And then there's also another video that's out there, which is a whole new one that takes place after Return to Sleepaway Camp. That is again like a fan-made film, but it's a proper feature, like it's a full. So yeah, I'll. That could get
let's do it.
That could get weird and complicated towards the end, but sure, why not?
Absolutely. No, all right, cool. Well, it sounds like you're entertaining the idea, so I'm all for it. Just I finished school this December, so my schedule, I'll be much more apt to recording, into 2020. So, but I mean, just let me know. Like the bottom line is just like this time, just say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, maybe around such and such week of such and such month. And I'm like, if you just give me fair warning, I could do it,
Sounds good, dude. I like that idea. All right, Axel, thanks so much, man.
All right, buddy.
Have a great night.
Good talking to you, man.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Don't call it a remake. This one is different. The original creator is on board as a producer. An absent parent. We got the thumbs up from the man who did the mask work back in 1978. Said this new version is great. He said this new version is great. Don't call it the future if you are clinging to the past. To push and pull the rightful owners full of nostalgia. The first one now is last. At your own risk, you ignore the bull. The Don't call it a promotion when all you did was hang around long enough to finally settle. Lose your bottle, forget your medal. Don't you make a sound. What are you anyway? On the back of this once brave and beautiful world. It's not 1988, and everything you touch will now soon break. Yeah, everything you touch will now break. I'm not your patsy or your partner, and I won't pretend. I've not forgotten all your failures and irregular behaviors and attempts to be the savior of a perfectly content and hardworking cat. So don't expect to buy your bread from off my back. Don't call it a movement when it's a revolution. While you preen and strut, ignoring the nation's gut, dying off in mass confusion.